Hey guys, happy New Year's Eve. And I really want to say, first of all, to start out, that I really appreciate you guys who are taking the time to be in here and make sure that we have a stream going and making this happen, because obviously this would be a lot less entertaining if it was just me talking to myself. So appreciate you guys taking the time to share with me. And I'm going to get things set up here. And let's see, I'm trying to figure out the operation. Okay, you know what? Come here, Josie. Come here. Come here. Happy New Year's Eve. And I got feedback coming off there. Trying to get the live chat figured out. Okay, here we go. Okay, come here, doctor. Okay, well, it's not often that I do shameless plugs. I'd be more than happy to put you down. Okay, doctors, please. What I need is for you guys to do what I asked you to do like 50 times right before I click the button. Okay? There you go. Thank you. Okay. Anywho, so, as you can probably tell, this is my first time really using streaming software, and I realize that there's some delay here, and there's a few things that, call it moving pieces, that I'm trying to get figured out. One of which actually being the chat, because I can't seem to get the chat pulled up here on the computer, but I'm going to just monitor the chat from my phone. And so, again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. And what I want to do is just start out by tell you a little bit about who we are, what we're doing here. This is the 2025 FarmSTREAM, and I hope to be doing more of these types of live streams from here in my home. Previously, I've done a handful of live streams where I am, in my vehicle, and it's finding connectivity here in Western New Hampshire can be a little bit challenging at times, but finally got Starlink set up, and so I'm hoping that you guys will let me know if there's any issues other than just abject lack of professionalism. Although with the stream, I guess these days that's called being genuine. So we are very genuine here in this live stream. As you can probably tell, this is like, I got to give you the long list of disclaimers. Once we're about 5 minutes deep, we're actually going to get to the meat and potatoes, and then that's going to go for a while. You can probably tell, had a little bit of a cold here, and so I am drinking some green tea, which is something I don't typically do. Not a huge fan of tea, but I figured I would do that and put the Rowan Ridge mug to a little bit of good use, and we could kind of see how it goes from there. So, I remember what it was like being able to taste things, and now I have a feeling it's going to be a minute until I'm able to use my taste buds again, but here we are. So we're learning by doing. I am employing some streaming software, and everything is off at like different times, and it's kind of crazy. Just there's so many different moving parts that we have to kind of keep track of, and it's a little bit crazy making. But first of all, thank you for taking the time to join here. I am Stephen Reichert, and this is Rowan Ridge Farm, where we are raising heritage hogs on pasture the old-fashioned way in Western New Hampshire, predominantly raising them on pasture, although my approach to farming and pigs in general is one that is relatively nuanced. And if you've read through the description for this live stream and this video, you've kind of found that there's a handful of different things. And what I would encourage you to do, because this stream is probably going to go pretty long, ideally, if everything goes to plan here, I may outlast some of you. I'm going to try to go all the way through to midnight if my kids don't like yank out power cords or do something untoward, and my voice holds out because, like I was starting to say before, been a little bit sick, And so I am trying to kind of get back on the horse. Also had a few sick animals and stuff like that too. But we're going to cover a handful of topics. One of the things that I really like about live streams is the fact that it can be a little bit more conversational. And that we have some opportunity to kick around ideas that will eventually find their way into full-length videos at some point. So if there's one or two things that interest you, go through the description, look and see what's there, skip ahead, go back. You got to kind of do a buffet style type of thing, because I started this YouTube channel in March, and I started it with the goal of making America farmers again. And what that simply means, it's a reference to the idea of obviously playing off of, political trope with MAGA. And while I'll tell you that my impressions of the whole MAGA thing have changed, and we can kick some of that stuff around. If you guys want to venture off the beaten path and get a little bit political, I'm happy to do some of that stuff too, because certainly while this channel is about farming, it's also about the things that affect farming, and all of this stuff is very much connected. My goal with starting this channel was to try to give exposure to what we're doing, because I wasn't born on a farm. I wasn't born in an agricultural part of the world. I was born in upstate New York, and I kind of traveled far and wide doing a whole bunch of different things that have less than nothing to do with agriculture. But during the pandemic a couple years ago, it became very apparent to me that there's a substantial need, I think an underestimated need, for domestic food production, and that the ability to build a strong community really doesn't go very far if you're relying on foreign countries to provide you with the food that you use to nourish your family and your neighborhood. And so part of making America great, I would argue the majority of making America great again, is making America independent and self-reliant and engaged with agriculture, because there's many, many benefits and things that are very important that we have lost as a culture, as a society, our birthright, our heritage, that are folded in with farming. And when America was farmers, we were, conquering the world, much to the dismay of a lot of people who, now want to apologize for that and feel bad. Well, I mean, that's the way history is, and that's the way it goes. But rather than getting off into the weeds on that, my point is just to say that's what I'm doing here. And if you are interested in this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you are not already subscribed to this channel, because I am trying to do live streams, I'm trying to do videos, put out a lot of content as I am able to do. But to tell you guys a little bit about where I am coming from, I know my videos may make it seem like I am, just this far behind the Smithfield operation, but the reality is I have a 10-acre farm in western New Hampshire, and I was going to complain about how cold it is, and then I see Chris here in the chat, who is who's in Alaska, and they're getting down to like -60. So thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you being here. No, all jokes aside, though, I do appreciate you tuning in from Alaska. As I was telling Chris in the chat earlier, I actually spent part of my youth in Alaska, and I was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 16 years old, in the Fairbanks Hospital up there. So it's funny, I kind of run into people on this channel who connect me to different places that I have either spent time or lived, and I've spent a lot of time traveling over the years, but kind of in my elder years here, I have been focused on family and putting down roots, and that's kind of how I wound up getting into farming. But yeah, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, because as you found tonight, I got confused. I thought I put Central Time, and I actually put Eastern Time. And so what happened was this live stream was supposed to go out at 9 o'clock, and I was still in the barn feeding, and fortunately you guys were here kicking things around in the chat and doing the heavy lifting, which is awesome to see, because that's like building community, and that's one of the main things that I want to be able to do through this channel and the stuff that we are making here, because well, farming is interesting, and I got a lot of different things that we're going to kick around. A lot of the questions and the topics that I want to discuss tonight are things that have come from you guys. I know Ryan, who's in here right now, Mike Stevens, who I think is going to be tuning in at some point, and a fellow named Hamburger. That's where I've been getting some of the questions that have populated kind of the topics of discussion. And if you guys have specific things that you want to kick around, feel free to interject, and I will kind of go back and forth between my monologues here and talking and looking at the chat. So just a couple other things. If you're interested in one of these Rowan Ridge Farm coffee mugs, these are heavy, high quality mugs, and you can get them. Just shoot me an email, info@nhpork.com. And while you're at it, let me just test out the software and see if I'm able to do this properly. Let us switch over to the desktop, and let's take a look at the Rowan Ridge Farm website, nhpork.com, and mobile friendly. We have contact, obviously all the socials, and the big thing that I would say would be useful is drop your email address in there, because unlike YouTube, that will restrict access. Anytime I'm doing something, even if maybe the YouTube algorithm is deciding not to smile upon me and push my content out to you, we can always stay in touch via email. And some of you have already done that, and I really appreciate it. So this is our website. I'm proud of it. It's all my my photography and my videos, and shows a little bit about what we're doing, and there you have it. Okay, so let's go back to my ugly mug here, and back. All right, there we go. Okay, so I just want to kind of kick around to start with a little bit about, what about farming is important. I got a question of like how I got here. And I know that when I was starting off or getting started initially in farming, it was a little bit intimidating for me because of the fact that I felt like, you need to be born in Iowa or Ohio or Indiana, Western Pennsylvania. You need to be born somewhere where there's a lot of cornfields around in order to be a farmer. Otherwise, you're just kind of pretending. And, what got me into farming, and I'm curious to hear from you guys. You can drop it in the chat or drop it in the comments if you're watching after the stream. Tell me a little bit about what got you into farming, because farms are all very different. And this is a point that I'm going to keep hitting on in all of my content. That's why there's so much nuance, like even looking at different breeds of pigs, and we'll talk about that tonight, certainly. Talk about different ways of raising pigs. Is it better to raise pigs in barns with, temperature control, vaccines, antibiotics, farrowing crates versus out on pasture? What's better, right? Is one better than the other? And there's so many different nuances that ultimately boil down to your individual situation. And I think one of the biggest things that I have taken away from the last year, and certainly the last several years, is the fact that by being relentlessly committed to exploring my path and being willing to pull in anything that might help from anywhere. So I will listen to organic, hippies. I will listen to the pork checkoff newsletter that comes in from the pork industry, where they're talking to people who are raising pork for, Tyson, Purdue, Smithfield, all the big, the big evil, big ag, etc. There are things that they do that work and that can improve my game. So yeah, I'm going to steal everything that I can from them and I'm going to use it. I'm not above that. And same thing goes from small producers that are doing everything, off the fat of the land and in very traditional ways. I'm going to use that too, because I'm trying to make something out of nothing. I didn't start with any knowledge, didn't start with anything. And I think for a lot of people that can be intimidating. But the fact that we have so much information today, and we have influencers and YouTubers who are farm YouTubers. Great question that I got from Sean. I think I've been calling Sean Ryan, not Sean Ryan, but name mix up. Sorry there, Sean. A question that I got from Sean, which I'm going to kind of dig into a little bit later in the stream, is who I have been listening to and watching, and kind of who were some of the guiding forces as I was getting established in this. And on one hand, like when I was first getting started, before I was at the doing phase, when I was at the planning phase, I spent a lot of time listening, reading, watching. And then the more I went from the planning phase to the doing phase, I became much more selective with listening, and it became much more about, I'm going to try this and work through it, which takes all of my time and attention before I really worry about being influenced by anyone or anything else. And I think that the abundance of information, so it is both a risk and it's also a benefit, and it's something that we have to guard against. And certainly one of the reasons why I started this channel, because I have had YouTube channels in the past, getting a little personal with you guys tonight, and also practicing doing the switching out on my the switch out on my software here. Back in the day when I used to climb stuff, this is my other channel. It's back in the day, around like 2014, Diabetes from the Ground Up is what I renamed it to, but this used to be a mostly climbing and adventure photography focused channel. And, I used to do videos, and I used to be halfway decent at, I was very interested in higher production stuff, and so I traveled to the Middle East. This is a film that I made testing out one of the Fuji cameras when I was in Oman, and I do not know if this is gonna... Oh, well, just quiet right now. I don't know if the audio is coming through. And anywho, let me try to skip to some of the... Anywho, yeah, I mean, I had a chance to kind of get in on the ground floor during the heyday, and work with, some diabetes advocacy, talking about my, time living with type 1 diabetes, as well as the way that got me into climbing. And ironically, of course, diabetes, apart from being a big, I guess you could call it an obstacle in my life, it kind of became a vehicle for me to push into different things. And honestly, without... thank you, Chris. Chris telling me that the audio sounds good. I'm happy to hear that. The diabetes kind of changed the direction of my life, and it's one of the things that really made me take notice during the pandemic and say, yeah, we need to get into farming, because we want to be doing something that actually matters. And there's a lot of the time that I spent kind of doing some of this stuff, which is cool. I got some cool YouTube videos out of it, and I met some really neat people. I got to learn a lot about photography and making, making some cool stuff that allows me to have a kind of a window into what I was doing in my past, and to kind of remember some of that stuff. But ultimately, those are all vehicles that kind of I've brought with me into my current iteration of what I'm doing here. with farming. And honestly, with the state of society being what it is, I think it's ironic that more people are not interested in farming or not getting into farming. And I'm hoping that my channel eventually can reach people who are kind of on the perimeters. I know that some of you are kind of in similar spots to me. Some of you are a little bit less experienced than I am. Some of you maybe a little bit more experienced. And my goal is to try to encourage the act of farming, but also to build community around the idea that this is something that is important for us to do, because within a short period of time after starting farming, you begin to realize that it's a lot of work, it's very expensive. And the question of why I am farming, I don't have a great answer for that other than I can't not do it. I started doing it because I wanted to see what it was like, and now it's just kind of part of me. And that's just how I feel about it. And it's, you know, not in a vegan kind of way, I wouldn't say, but I don't feel like the pigs are family as such, but it's like when you have animals that their personality, you spend time with them, you've been around them, had to take care of them, you've gotten them from the time they were a baby, and then like some of them you've baby all the way, a couple of litters, they've done some breeding for you, and then you put them in the freezer, and it's like you go through these life cycles. There's always a question of how can I do this a little bit better, and it's hard to kind of disembark or get off the ride until I know that, okay, I've maxed out the best that I can do with the resources that I have, and now I'm going to just call it a day and I'm going to move on to something else. And so that idea, that drive of being able to just do it a little bit better, every iteration, that's a big thing that pushes me. You know, one of the things I know I listen to, obviously this is not a political channel, but I spend a lot of my time in the barn not listening to Justin Rhodes or Homesteady or Joel Salatin, which nothing against any of those YouTubers. They're all wonderful folks. But I spend my time in the barn listening to things that are largely unrelated to farming. And so a lot of what I listen to is politics. And I've discussed with some of you, like I've been kind of in the weeds on the whole like Charlie Kirk thing since that happened. Not because I was ever a big fan of Turning Point, but that organization has always been well known to me. And so kind of you get used to seeing somebody around, and then when they're gone, then it's like, wait a minute, what happened? And you see all the infighting and the collapsing, and there's a substantial loss of normalcy and stability. And when I look at what is waiting in the wings, I see a lot of AI slop, and also, AI slop, and then also a lot of, I think, credible discussions of war, and we don't know what that's going to look like and where that could go. And so, at a time when, I remember kind of, and Mikey Man 1974 says here, from my experience, most people want to stay uninformed as long as they're relatively comfortable. And so it's like out of sight, out of mind. And I've been there, so I don't say that with any disdain or judgment, but that is certainly the way that most people operate, and that's the way I operated. And I think we're reaching a point where it's getting harder and harder to do that, regardless where you stand politically or socially. The option of sitting on the fence is running out. And one of the things when we talk about independence, and I'm trying to think of a word that will not get me in trouble in terms of service, but things that generally might be associated with what happened in 1776, not too far from, well, including this area of New England. There's like, everybody is looking for what can I do, but I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to go too far. Everybody wants to be able to have some option. And to me, the simplest option in terms of freedom, independence, family, community, all of the things that are under attack. And it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, Democrat or Republican. Like, you can see all of this stuff, family, things that are real, that matter, values, right? These are all things that are under attack from all different angles, and there's no safe space. There's no place to go where it's like, oh, if I just kind of vote for this party, then I'm safe from all that stuff. And if I just, vote for this guy, then I don't have to worry about it. It's everywhere. And the answer is not out there. It's kind of in our own backyard. So that's a little bit about my motivation, because I think that the more independent we can become, and again, those of you who are already starting to do this farming, who have been raising some pigs, who are getting the ball rolling, and those of you who are kind of dipping your toe in the water, maybe who haven't gotten there yet, who haven't started, I promise you that when you actually start trying to take the food that you are growing and you try to share it, mobilize it, sell it, do anything with it beyond just the bare minimum of I'm going to feed my family with it, like you might do with deer, but you try to say, you know what, I want to try to feed my neighbors with this, and you know what, since I'm going to raise another pig for them, I'm going to charge a little bit, and as soon as money starts changing hands, everything starts getting weird, and you begin to realize that the government is really, really, really set up not to be your friend, not to help you, and maybe not, due to any malevolence or bad intent. But the reality is that the regulatory framework within our country that is all based on good intentions. It's all, oh, well, we just want to make sure that people aren't selling diseased meat. We want to make sure that everything is safe. We want to make sure that everything is clean. You've probably heard the saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I promise you that the vast majority of the regulatory structures that exist that make it so difficult for small farmers to be able to profit and to be able to take a side hustle and grow it gradually, not irresponsibly and by leaps and bounds, but to grow it a little bit at a time so that they can grow it safely without being reliant on the bank, without having to, put their, children up to the third and fourth generation into crippling debt by taking out massive loans, but to do it a little bit at a time responsibly and to build profitably. That is all made very, very difficult by government regulations that are all based on good intentions. It's this school marm approach of, oh, well, what if this happens? Oh, you know what could happen? Oh, that's not good. What if this happens? What if that happens? Rather than telling people, hey, listen, like, if you trust the farmer who's growing your meat and they're reasonably transparent with you where you feel comfortable and you can see what's going on there, you don't need a 4-letter USDA. Gave myself away there. You don't need the USDA to come and inspect and tell you that it's okay to eat that. Because you know where that animal was raised. You can walk and see where it was raised. You can see how it's being raised when it's alive. You can go to my farm, like, for example, and you can see how animals are slaughtered if you want to. You can come to my farm and feed my animals. And you can say, hey, I like this or I like that. I want it done this way. I want it done that way. And I'm not saying that I like let the public come and, it's not like a farm to suit where I, change my techniques based on what people want. But if a person wants something that's not what I'm doing, it's very transparent and they can see. And then it's like they're free to go find somebody who does it the way that they want. And when you have that kind of eyeball to eyeball connection with your community, it's much less tempting to cut corners and to do things in a way that is, not responsible. Not only because I want repeat business, but I really am not going to have repeat business. I'm not going to be improving what I'm doing with my business if I have to, explain to people why somebody got sick and went to the hospital because they ate my pork because, something that I did to cut a corner, And so the regulatory stuff is, well, it's something that you kind of have to encounter as we do this. All right, so first kind of topic here that I got, and I would love to have you guys, kick in. I'm following the chat here on my phone, which is off to the side because it's not loading on my computer. So I'm doing the best that I can with this cobbled together duct tape setup. But I want to just do a little year in review. So 2025, I started my YouTube channel. My first upload on this channel was in March. And right now we are somewhere around 840 subs. My big goal for, I guess, not 2025, because it's unlikely that I am going to get 150 subs off of this live stream. But my goal in the short term, next goal really with YouTube, is to get the channel monetized. And the only thing I need is pretty much like 160-ish more subscribers. So again, if you haven't done so already, click the subscribe button, and let's keep building this community. And my goal is to make this channel profitable. I want to do it well, not only because I want this message about making America farmers again to reach more people and to benefit more people, but I want to be able to have a little bit more of an open door to spend time doing this stuff, so that I can use that to offset what I'm doing with the animals. So you have kind of one hand washing the other. So it's not making videos being something that takes away from the farm, but rather making videos is something that can add to the farm by adding and diversifying the income streams that we have. I have grown my herd this year. In 2025, I've grown my herd by, well, about double. Probably a little bit more than double. I went from 10 sows, and I've added on 9 and 3, 12, plus a couple of feeders. By a couple, I mean 4 at this point. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, excuse me, one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit about later is kind of the changes that I've seen and the evolution, thanks to Sean, this question, the changes in the evolution that have come about as I have been farming, and kind of the growth that I've seen and what the biggest changes are for me. And all of those big changes, they all come with the expansion of the farm. That's where things always turn a corner and get weird, because you think you got things under control, you got everything buttoned up, and then you say, oh, you know what? I'm pretty much printing money with these pigs. Let me go ahead and get more pigs, and I'm going to print more money. It's going to be great. All I got to do is just feed them a little bit of corn, right? And then you find that the difference between 5 pigs and 10 pigs is a massive difference, right? There's a certain inflection point that we're going to talk about here, where it goes from being, okay, this is not bad, not bad, not bad, not bad, 1 more, 2 more, no big deal. And then all of a sudden, too much. And then you have to change everything. And so I kind of started to run into that last year. I made some expansions last year in going from 2024 into 25. And that is what motivated me to redo my barn and to get some work done there, and to frankly invest. And that hurt financially. That hurt, because I put some money into that. I mean, the price was very reasonable for the work that was done, and I had my friend do it, and he was excellent, and he gave me a very good deal and did more than certainly what he was required to. He didn't give me the bare minimum. But it was, when you're shelling out that much money, it's like, oh man, whew, that hurts. But on the flip side, the expansion that I have done in my herd, going from 20-ish all told to 40-ish all told, it feels about the same amount of work with twice the amount of animals. And so I still have to kind of learn my way around this setup to be able to maximize efficiency, learn how to use everything efficiently and properly, be able to move the animals and have, having, you guys probably have seen the video that I made of that, talking about the pig barn design and the layout. And if you guys have specific questions about that, I'm happy to kick those around here while we're in the live stream as well. But I had a lot of new folks come to the channel from that video, so if that's your case, I appreciate you taking the time and being in here. A couple of comments real quick. Chris said hundreds of thousands of people every year quite happy to receive non-USDA inspected venison packages. And Mikey Man's 1974. Funny how people rationalize one but not the other. I'm assuming you're talking about the USDA inspected versus the non-USDA inspected. And yeah, very, very true. It's not an issue of safety. It's an issue of people who don't actually know what's happening on a farm are the people that are going to latch on to that and say, oh yeah, we absolutely need this. And this is, again, the reason why I'm trying to trick everyone into being farmers. Make America farmers again, because if you are raising animals, you will very quickly realize how absolutely ass backwards it is to tell people that they are not free to engage in commerce. Consenting adults, full transparency. This is the product. This is how we raise it. How would you like it cut? This is where we're cutting it. Looks good to me. Okay. Do you know how the temperatures, all the rest of that stuff? Like, it's absolutely ludicrous that the government and that people like George Washington is got to be turning over in his grave. They dumped tea into the Boston Harbor for, putting like a 2-cent tax on their tea. And we now have federal organizations that, like, people are legitimately concerned when you start pulling on some of this stuff and saying, hey, wait a minute, do we really need this? Can we just get rid of this? And you have, the awfuls, the affluent, white, upper class liberals, awfuls, affluent, female, whatever. My spelling is, I can't spell this off the top of my head, but I'm sure you're familiar with the acronym of awfuls. You have the Karens, the Karen class. And that's not, I'm not being prejudicial against ladies, because there's certainly plenty of men, at least nominally speaking, men who fall into that same group where it's like, oh, please govern me harder, daddy. Like, I need your protection, because otherwise I might accidentally eat an animal that has been left, rotting and bloated into the sun, and has not been safely, addressed or butchered. Anybody who's actually doing this stuff and actually dealing in animal husbandry can look at a setup and say, this is kosher. This is not kosher. I will buy from this guy. I will not buy from this guy. And 99 times out of 100, they're going to hit it right on the nose. But anyways, we'll get into ragging on the USDA and giving them a proper New Hampshire style roasting. And I'm not a New Hampshire native, but I do appreciate the logo, the Live Free or Die, which unfortunately there's fewer and fewer people who are adhering to that ethos here in the state. But there's a few of us, and refugees. I came from upstate New York mid-pandemic to try to, live free as opposed to dying. And so far, we're still alive. We're still doing this here. So in addition to the animals, so we added basically double the sows and double the boar. So I had 2 boars, purebred Tamworth, purebred Old Spot. Both of those have papers. And then I added a purebred Berkshire and another purebred Old Spot. The Old Spot is one from, he's a breeding of my existing Old Spot boar. So Charlie, my big boy, my big Old Spot sire, I think I'm gonna probably try to send him down the road, because I like Old Spots, but again, I have to come to terms with the reality of limited space, and there is not, there really isn't room to have all the pigs I want. Otherwise, I would just have, a handful of every breed of pigs probably, and that would go south real quick. So I'm going to be going from 4 boars to 3. My 2 new boars, they're both purebreds, and they're both on the small side. So we're going to try to rotate them through so that I have an appropriate mix of large physical boars that can handle the big mamas, and also, in line with body positivity, of course. And then we want to have a couple of smaller boars that can handle the new girls that are coming into the herd, because a lot of them are just like, 4 months old. And I want to get them bred as soon as possible, but I also don't want it too soon where they wind up getting injured because of the fact that they're getting smashed by, literally, by a boar that is too big, right? So, and theoretically, a big boar should be able to get the job done without injuring the female. Like, they can figure it out logistically, but I like to have a variety of sizes to kind of cover everything. And we can talk a little bit about boars and kind of my general strategy with integrating boars and new animals into the herd. So then, aside from all the barn stuff that we got done, which has been fantastic, and the new animals, which I will talk about in a little bit, because that's kind of in the what has changed part of things, where I talk a little bit about kind of the changes that come with growth. Every time you're expanding, it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you have to prepare for that. And the first couple of times that I brought new breed stock onto the farm, I wasn't prepared for that. It was, sweet, I got these expensive, shiny, fancy new purebred animals. We're going to have so much fun. They're so cute. Everything is great. I'm seeing all these visions of like what's going to come from this and how this is going to go. And then what happens is, those animals, a certain percentage, I've gotten to the point where I factor in about 10%, maybe 20% are going to succumb, because purebreds, they're always a little bit weaker. They're always a little bit behind the curve in my experience. And so you gotta, there's no livestock without dead stock. And so you have to kind of prepare for that and get ready, so that when you bring the new animals in, part of the integration is going to probably mean some of them getting sick, possibly some of them dying. And then, of course, if you go the other way and you miscalculate and not enough of them die, and you actually do better than you were planning to do, then guess what? Now your barn is a little more uncomfortably full, and you got to figure that out too. So, been dealing with that. But in addition to all the animal stuff, my wife and I had our first son. And so baby Gold Medal, as his 2 older sisters, who are 3 and change, almost 4, and 2, have named him, but it's Alistair's what we're calling him. And it's been wild in a lot of ways, because there's been so much kind of on our plate that we've been dealing with and juggling. And it seems like we've been able to lay the track out ahead of ourselves just enough, just in time, where things change and improve enough and grease those rails, and we can kind of get down a little bit faster. And it's like, okay, we got enough to get to here. And so we kind of are taking it a little bit at a time. And it's been very good. It's good, because this would be like, the challenge is part of why I do it. And obviously challenge has to be something within reason, because you don't want to take your family on a death spiral. You want it to be something that is, tenable for everybody. But it's something that has helped, my family grow and our relationship. And certainly it's helping me grow as a person, I would say, because we pray for patience, and then God sends your kids along and has them do really annoying stuff, or has circumstances develop in your life that produce really irritating situations. And you're like, no, I meant just actually have less irritation in my life, is kind of what I was getting at. That's what I meant by patience. So we have to clear some of those things up with the Almighty. But that notwithstanding, He has not abandoned me yet, and I have not abandoned Him. So we're continuing to work through this process as a family. And thank you, Sean. This is literally my first super chat ever. Congrats on the new breed stock. Go Max, America first. I could not agree more. with all of those sentiments. And thank you. I appreciate that. You are my first ever super chat. And I was actually wondering if tonight was going to be the night where I was going to see like how all this stuff works, because I've never gotten a super chat before. So that's pretty cool. Thank you, Sean. Much appreciated, dude. Um, and then the last thing in terms of my year in review um, that has changed. Well, I guess I actually wasn't planning on sharing this because I don't know how much it's relevant, how much you guys are interested in hearing about kind of my from doing a full-time nursing schedule of 312. We call that full-time. Although when you factor in like an hour kind of coming and going, it's closer to 14-hour shifts. So it's pretty brutal when you do 312s in a row and you're kind of going all day and you're getting up at 4:30, 5-ish in the morning, and you're not back until like 8:30, and then you still have to go to the barn and feed the animals and clean everything up, and you're doing castrating on the weekends. And the nice thing obviously about a hospital schedule is that you get to have longer weekends, so that's pretty cool. The downside, of course, is that your 4-day weekend, once you sleep to recover from your 3 days where you're in the hospital, so that day 4 is sleep, and then you start to kind of move a little bit on day 5, and then day 6 you get something done, and then day 7 you're like, I got to go to work tomorrow, I have to start getting in work mode, and then everything kind of cuts back. So time wise, that working 312s in the hospital, it sounds good, but it's in order to really take advantage of it, that extra time has to come from somewhere. And that time comes from your sleep or your family or your fitness or all of the above in different portions. And so that's one of the things that I am trying to do with what I am doing with the animals, because I have noticed that I have a bad habit, call it perfectionism, where I always want to make it a little bit better. And sometimes the better is actually better, but there's also a lot of times where I catch myself like taking a rake and scraping dirt from one pile and putting it into another pile because it just looks better. And it's like, that took me 5 minutes and that didn't actually improve anything for my animals. It just makes me feel like I'm doing something about the mess that they're making. And the reality is they're pigs. They're going to be a mess. And one of the things I highly recommend, like, go visit other farms, because that's a good way to get some perspective. Let me put it that way. It's a good way to get some perspective, because when I go to other farms, not always, but a lot of times when I go to other farms, I see the way people are raising their animals, and like, they're totally okay with how they're raising their animals. They're not like, oh man, we're just getting by, this is tough. They're like, oh yeah, we got pigs, we're doing this is great, everybody's happy, everybody's feeling good. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, I'm listening for Sarah McLachlan, Arms of an Angel playing, and I'm like, these animals are like skinny and they don't look good. They're like sleeping in mud, and it's 30-ish degrees and windy. Like, this looks pretty grim, and I see that and I'm like, kind of makes me take that into consideration with what I'm doing. And my animals have big piles of hay and their stuff is relatively clean, and it's like, you can always get more carried away, but the important thing is to do the important things and then be able to differentiate from the stuff that actually bakes bread and makes things work better versus the things that just kind of are pretend work that aren't actually making things better, just wasting your time. I wasted a lot of time, and now it's on record here, so we're gonna have to see that. So we're gonna have to do something about that. And Sean's saying, this is my first super chat. Baron Coleman is next. Haven't been able to tune into him, and yeah, usually lag. Well, there's always some here. Yeah, and burnout. Chris is talking about burnout. That's absolutely a very important thing, because one of the things that really made it easier for me to put more money into the infrastructure, even though it was a substantial wad of cash, it made me realize that, like I can't raise the price of pork. I can only go so premium in terms of the quality of animals that I'm breeding, for piglets, because piglets are kind of my main market offering. That's the main thing why people are seeking me out. It's breed stock, and feeder pigs. And apparently, they like what they see when they come here to the farm, so that's good. I don't have perspective on that, so I'm just like, oh, it's not clean enough. It's not clean enough. But other people are like, oh, this is a lot cleaner than somebody else whose farm I went to, and so I'm happy about that. So, um, being able to kind of drill down on some of that stuff and say, all right, if I want to make more money with this, I need to be looking at diversifying and obviously content here. And that's a big part of the reason why I'm trying to get the channel growing and to create things that are going to be more engaging and more valuable to people as a whole, so that this YouTube channel can actually bring in some money, because I'm not embarrassed or ashamed, um, about the idea of wanting to be profitable in the stuff that we're doing. Because if you're not profitable in what you're doing, there's a name for that. That's called like not doing it anymore, because you can only do something at a loss for a certain period of time, and then it just begins to be too much. And so, one of the things that I have done, in addition to the content plan here and trying to get my YouTube channel a little bit more, I'm kind of at like an inflection point, because once the channel is monetized, I can justify putting a little bit more time into it. But until it's monetized, and also at this time of year, I got 2 litters of piglets that need to be cut, and I got to get those piglets sold. Whether they're already spoken for, but I got to get them cut, weaned, out the door. But my new breed stock, they're in the weaner pen, so they need to go out on, it's like musical chairs, basically. And so I have all these little things, and it's like I really want to make videos, which is one of the reasons why I'm hoping to do more live streams, just because obviously there's no editing, for better or worse. And being able to just go and talk through ideas and kind of work through some ideas that are going to ultimately eventually get made into longer form content. But just for right now, I have the nuts and bolts of, no pun intended, nuts and bolts of castrating and getting that stuff squared away. That stuff can't wait. And so I kind of have to do what I got to do. But trying to be more efficient, manage my time a little bit better, that's really ultimately the justification for the money that I've spent to improve the infrastructure, because there's a limited amount of money that you can make off of farming in terms of the products that you're going to sell. But content, like, and again, I keep skipping ahead, but one of the things I want to talk about and kind of dig into a little bit as a topic is going to be like who I watch on YouTube, who I have watched in the past, who I watch currently, and kind of my views on farm tubers, and including myself in that. And I have some opinions that may be a little unpopular, maybe a little bit harsh, and also some that probably are kind of middle of the road too. So you guys can let me know what you think. But there are some YouTubers who, if it were not for their YouTube channel, you would never know their name. The reality is that, and I'll pick on Justin Rhodes here a little bit, because he's so much bigger and more, established on YouTube than I am. I think it's reasonable. And I don't know that this is necessarily even a criticism or a critique, but like, you don't know Justin Rhodes because you went to the store and his ham is in the store, because he raises the absolute, he was able to expand and scale, and he has like this fantastic pork production that's like changing the market. You know him because of his YouTube channel. He is a much more successful YouTuber. If you took the YouTube away and his assets were relegated strictly to his farming, it would be a very different situation financially. And so my goal is not necessarily to try to make a ton of money off of the farm, but it's to make enough to be not losing money. And then anything beyond that, I think there's a lot that can be done by community and helping other people, consultation. You know, we started offering some classes here this past fall. That was another thing that we did. I don't know if Michael Bellino is here. He bought a few mugs off of me. Thank you, Michael. And it was very helpful. Actually, he came over a couple of times after the class and helped me, you know, clean out the barn and do some work, because he's just new to the whole homesteading thing and he wants to learn. And so he's in the area, and I'm happy to have somebody stop by who's, you know, is a friend who wants to get stuff done. Chris says, previous job I did 13 days off, 13 days on, 1 off, 14 hours a day, not including the commute, for almost 9 months on swing shift. That, yeah, burnout is, I could see that being a real thing. And Mikey Man says, burnout from my last job on top of some other factors pushed me and my girlfriend towards farming. Yeah, I've gotten much more willing to sacrifice money in favor of having time. It's just, you got to be careful that doesn't happen with farming, because with farming, you buy animals when they're little and you got big dreams in your head, and then you forget that in like 2 months these animals are going to be 3 times the size and they're going to be eating 3 times as much, and that money's got to come, and that feed's got to come from somewhere, and then everything compounds really quick. And this is something that I see happening a lot in the homestead homestead community here in New Hampshire, every fall, every spring. And there's people, actually, I would call them they call them hillbillies in the method of farming. And I don't mean that as, there's a complimentary version of that term, hillbilly, and there is the term the way I'm using it right now, which is kind of slipshod, ham-fisted approach, where it's buy any type of pig you can. Don't worry about, you know, the genetics. Don't worry about the health. Don't worry about the living conditions. Just slap up a couple of pallets with some T-posts and, you know, throw a tarp over it and just give them some ground corn. Get some piglets out there, whatever you can, because in the spring you're going to be selling, you know, you undercut the price of your piglets by maybe $25, and then every Facebook post that goes up on, you know, the local farming groups on Facebook, that's where back when I used to advertise, that's where I would focus most of my stuff. And occasionally I'll post something there, but at this point now I have, my reservations are bought out, like, well, already. I'm actually a little bit over my reservation number, but I'm kind of on the bubble there, and it's not even 2026 yet for spring piglets. So I kind of just go a different route with that stuff. So I just kind of watch it and I smile and cringe a little bit. But and the people, they just breed all these pigs, dump all these piglets, and then they're swimming in money. And then it's like, quick, get rid of everything. You know, they'll keep them through the summer and maybe try to sell some pork a little bit here and there, liquidate some of those breeders, because those breeders were never, excuse me, acquired with any sort of intention to improve genetics. They were just acquired to give me a litter of pigs because I want to make some money in the spring. And then by the time leaves start falling and the prospect of having to keep these animals, feed them, bed them through the winter rolls around, it's like, give me $500 and you can have like 15 pigs. And it rubs me the wrong way seeing people do that. And again, they're within their rights to do that, but it's just kind of a very haphazard way of approaching genetics and breeding. And it's something that I'm always kind of complaining about, because a lot of times people come to me for piglets and they say, hey, how much? And I say, well, it's $150 a pop, which again, these prices regionally in this area, $150 is not cheap, but it's not that expensive. I've seen piglets, like feeder piglets, 8 weeks old, cut, males cut, everybody wormed. You know, we'll see that pretty commonly. Whereas like in Pennsylvania, Ohio, it might be like, you know, $50 less, and that's kind of the going price, but it's a regional thing. But I try to explain to people there's a reason why, like, I'm not trying to sell the cheapest product. I'm trying to sell the best product that I can. And there are other people that are trying to sell the cheapest product that they can, And so they don't mind knocking a little bit off because they're putting less in. So they make less on each sale, but they're investing less in each one of those piglets. And it becomes fairly obvious when people get piglets home that just die out of the clear blue sky, and it's like, oh, well, bummer. Couple questions here. Sean asks, what ratio and type of feed and amounts of feed are you feeding your breeding stock and feeder pigs? And do you finish your feeders on 100% corn for the final 30 or 45 days? Good questions. Okay, let's talk about feed for a second, because one of literally the last thing on my 2025 year in review that I wanted to mention was moving to bulk feed delivered. So this is just briefly to give you a quick progression. When I first started raising pigs, it was go to Tractor Supply, Runnings. That's our version of like the farm store here. And between those two stores, you can buy bagged hog feed for, it was about $20 a bag, maybe 19, somewhere between there. And then cracked corn, somewhere around $12 a bag. Whole corn, maybe $11 a bag. And when you're feeding 4 pigs, 6 pigs, bagged feed is okay. There's no point in like just 50-pound bags, and you're spending a lot more per pound, but you don't have to deal with storage issues or any of that, the logistics of having to get feed delivered or transport it. So once I went up to, let's say, 12 pigs or so, I found a farmer in Eastern Massachusetts on the coast, Littleton, Mass. And I will give a shout out to anybody in the New England area who is looking for bulk feed. Frank Matheson of Springbrook Farm, absolutely outstanding guy. Excuse me. Outstanding guy, runs a great farm. It's been operating since the 1700s, so he's not like a Johnny come lately. But you can basically contact him and say, I want some pig feed. I'd like this much. He'll put it in like a big bulk bag, up to a ton in a bag, or however many tons you want. And pretty much what I got up to, I was doing about 2 tons a month. And the only drawback with that is that in order to make use of Springbrook Farm, and I'm always sending people to him because I've had to move away from that because I was doing a 2 hours and change drive down there with a Toyota Tacoma, which is not really meant for towing 2 tons of grain plus a dual axle trailer, which I would rent from U-Haul. So each day that I'm getting, once a month, I'm spending pretty much like a day and a half, 2 days of just completely doing nothing or accomplishing nothing other than just getting feed in, going down to U-Haul an hour away, pick up the trailer, go from U-Haul out to the farm, pick up the feed, and then bring the feed back, unload everything, and then I still have to bring the trailer back. And I will tell you, there was a point in time where I was unloading feed when I didn't have a tractor, and I was literally getting into those big bulk bags with a big snow shovel and scooping it out into my IBC totes. And honestly, at the time, for the savings, because the amount of feed that I was going through, he was charging, I think, $400 a ton compared to like $750, almost $800 a ton for the bag feed. And when you're, 10, 12, 14 pigs, you're starting to feel that in the pocketbook much more so. And so I was like, you know what, good to go. But yeah, I moved to Blue Seal feed, which is delivered. And of course, Blue Seal, Kent Nutrition, they're like a national big mega muckety muck in animal nutrition and feed. And the salesman that I've been working with, he actually was instrumental in bringing over some of the original Old Spot lines over here to the U.S. Very knowledgeable guy, very, very nice guy. He came out here from Maine, which is out to New Hampshire, probably 2-hour drive. to meet me, to see the operation, see the setup, and to kind of walk around. And he knew. I mean, I told him, like, I'm going to be small potatoes here. Like, this is not like I'm not buying 20 tons a month. This is going to be every 2 months. I'm going to buy like 4 tons, and that's going to be it for now. Um, but and it was a little scary because my driveway is like really gnarly. It's real steep at one point, which is super fun when you have like freezing rain and everything gets like slicked down, which is currently the case. And also the steepest part of the driveway happens to be on a hairpin turn. So I have a long driveway with a real steep spot right at the hairpin turn. Really fun for big trucks trying to make deliveries and come in and out of here. So he was, kind of helping me troubleshoot that, and we figured out how to get it done. And boy, I'll tell you, having that truck pull in the driveway and the guy just swing that boom into the barn. I put up a short a little bit ago, and it was just so nice to be able to walk out there with my coffee in my hand, hand the man a check, and say thank you very much. And yes, it is a little bit more expensive per ton, but when you factor in the cost of renting the trailer from U-Haul, and then you factor in the time of transportation, you factor in the wear and tear on the truck and all of that stuff, it actually, I'm fairly certain that I'm saving money at this point. And also the other thing is it's pelleted feed. So the feed that I was buying, it was all mash. It was just ground. When you have mash, it can blow around. It's a little harder to scoop up. It tends to get wasted a little bit easier. So that has been kind of the last part of my yearly improvements here that we've been doing. I'm just turning the page here, and then I'm going to actually answer some of the questions here. So yeah, Sean is asking, what ratio and types of feed am I feeding my breed stock from feeder pigs? Trying to differentiate a little bit about kind of what I'm feeding breeders versus feeders. Honestly, that is not an area where I've drilled down too much and gotten super scientific, other than quantities. The differentiation comes more in terms of calories and calorie density, more so than specific formulations. So they do make Kent Nutrition. They do make what do they call it? Like a sow. And then they make a sow feed, and then they make a grower feed. And looking at the nutritional labels, there's not a ton of difference between the two. And so my approach is to really, I've never fed anything special to my breed stock. I just try to make sure that, my animals are a little bit overfed, being honest, especially in the wintertime. If I got to go one way or the other, I'm going to err on the side of, you know what, come on, you deserve it. Here, have a little extra scoop. I don't want you going to bed hungry, especially when it's going to be, 15 degrees overnight. I want you to be, a little fat and happy. And I'm, that's kind of my mindset. I've tried to be a little bit more disciplined with the feeding now that I'm feeding a very strict ration. Basically, I feed 1 scoop of the hog grower per pig. And then there is a dairy feed, also pelleted feed, is more corn. And I guess probably is just kind of more of a corn, soy, and they have a couple of vitamins in there, but it's a pellet. And that is called Milk Maker. And it's a 16% pellet, but it does not have lysine in it. So what I have been doing is to supplement lysine. There is a commune type of farm that's on my way home from work that makes cheese. And so I will stop by there on my way home from work, and I have a little small electric pump, plug that in, hook up the hoses, pump out from their bulk tank and pump it into my little IBC tote, get a couple gallons of that, and I bring that back, every so often. And what I do is I mix that with the Milk Maker, and it adds some more calories, adds some more protein. But the big thing is that whey from making cheese, it has a lot of lysine in it. And so it actually adds a little bit more of a boost So I really focus on making sure that the whey is going to lactating moms and the babies. And then in terms of the younger breed stock, you know, I'm not really feeding them anything special. Like when they're small, if I get them as piglets, and this year I kind of missed the window. I missed the window to get them at the size that I like, because I like getting piglets when they're small and I can pick them up with one hand and like off we go. And I can put them in a dog crate in the back of the truck, no problem. What I wound up doing this year, they were like kind of 3.5 months old, definitely not being picked up by with one hand. They're like, 85 pounds and full of piss and vinegar. So at this size, they're kind of, once they're pushing 100 pounds, trying to put them on a bulk feeder, you're kind of asking for trouble, because if the feeder goes empty, then they start saying, hey, what's going on here? Let's tip the feeder over and see if we can figure out why. And so after a couple of those incidents, I'm not bulk feeding or like free feeding them anymore. They get a scoop or so per, basically 2 buckets of feed, and I put out dishes in the snow and just kind of go through, dump everything, and they kind of cycle back and forth, and they get that. But they get the same ration as everybody else, just a little bit, let's say a little bit less, because I don't want them gaining too quickly. I want them gaining, but not too fast, because breed stock, of course, you don't want them getting too fat too quickly. And then in terms of finishing feeders on corn, I try to add in a little something. It kind of depends on what's going on at that time of year. Like this fall, we had an amazing mast season. Like we had acorns out the wazoo, like I have never seen. And so I really didn't add anything else. I just kind of tried to make sure that the buckwheat and the clover were being seeded and reseeded, and I try to chase the pigs and make sure that I got cover crops planted that are going to help boost nutritional values, and that in addition to the grain, they can have as much of that stuff as they want. And I'm going to call it a day. I'm not going out of my way to do anything special in terms of the formulation. Like if everything aligns properly at the right time of year, I will go and get apples and I'll feed that. But like my pigs were already a little bit on the older side by the time it was ready for them to get harvested in the fall. I think it was like a live stream talking about kind of the dangers of having too much fat or overfeeding and having too fat pigs. And that's definitely something that kind of bit me in the rear end. Excuse me. Bit me in the rear end this year. So if anything, I think that, the flavor of the meat from the animals that we've produced here has been phenomenal. Beautiful color, decent marbling. What I'm kind of starting to work on now is really selecting and culling to identify the crosses and the breeds that are going to give me the best meat quality, as well as the best hardiness and performance on the pasture, because that's a big part of it too. That's another thing that I think a lot of people, when they're talking about breeding, I think a lot of people kind of overlook, is that if you have a mom that you have to help out 3 times in a row, like that's 3 strikes, you're out. Like you're giving yourself a lot more work. Like I see these posts pop up on the Facebook groups. People are like, "Oh, what do I need to do? My mom's she's gonna farrow. What should I be there? Should I not? What should I get? What do I do? I gotta, everybody wants to kind of put their oar in the water." And the reality is, Mama knows what to do. And if she doesn't know what to do, then she's not Mama. She's pork chops. That's kind of the way that it is. Like, and if you can cull hard to build a herd that works for you, based on what you want, based on the time that you have, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. Like I don't intend to have 40 pigs on my farm moving forward, but after a year, there's going to be culling happening, and that's going to give us a higher concentration of better genetics. And when I say better genetics, a lot of that, you got to select for certain things one at a time and kind of make those choices. You're not kind of selecting a whole bunch of things at once in most cases. But one of the biggest things that I always want to select for is, does this pig give me more work to do or less work to do? Can I count on them to just wherever they're at, they're going to sit down, have their babies, take care of the placenta, get everybody out, feed everybody, wean everybody, get the job done? Or is this an animal that I got to be running around after them being like, no, please don't sit on your babies? Like, if it's that type of animal, they got to go, because it's just not, you're making your life harder. Yeah. So, I mean, in short, I know some people do finish on the corn, but again, and maybe this is because I tend to have fattier breeds and I feed a little bit more aggressively. Plus, I don't really subtract grain in favor of the calories that they're getting off of the pasture. I just kind of count that as like, whatever they're eating in buckwheat. Like, buckwheat is super cheap. It's got tons of lysine, grows real quick. It's like, it's a real good cover crop. One of my favorites. And I'm not subtracting grain for that for the most part. So, and I also like to finish my pigs a little bit heavier. So most of the time I'm kind of trying to do a slower finish rather than like, okay, it's 6 months. I'm going to do 6 weeks now to get them to 7, or like 4 to 6 weeks where I'm going to just pour the grain on, pour the corn and really hit the fat. I'd rather let them go like 8, maybe 9 months and let them just kind of finish out a little bit slower, because I feel like you get an opportunity to get more intramuscular fat rather, and that this may be just like, old wives' tale, or, something that I've cooked up in my head that has no basis in reality. I can't show you a study at the University of Iowa, for example, that says if you finish your animal slower over a longer period of time, it's going to be better. But I feel like with the animals that I've cracked open, the ones that are bigger and finish slower, they tend to have, get more of that intramuscular fat rather than just laying it down as a fat cap on top that's just going to all get trimmed off. Bellino's Bounty. Hey, Steven, I'm here. Thank you for the shout out. Hope to see you again soon. Happy New Year, by the way. Yes, Happy New Year, Mike, as well. And Sean says 12 or 14% for sows versus 16, 18 crude for the growers. So good question, Sean. I mean, really looking at the difference in the protein content, you can't do everything at once. And if I had enough room, here's me making excuses, but I'll level with you, because that's a valid point. My pork is, there's no nice way to say this, it's accidental pork, right? Like, the purpose of my farm is not a finishing feeder pigs operation. My focus on my farm is breeding piglets, building better pigs. That's kind of the main thing that I'm looking to do. And so what I'm trying to do is trying to find a middle ground where I can feed a good ratio or a good ration for growers that's not going to completely tip the scales on the breeders and be too much for them where they get too fat. But I also don't want the growers wasting away. But as I kind of mentioned before, like, I'm not trying to push my feeder pigs out the door at like 6.5 months. I'm okay with like just keeping them on the normal ration that everybody else is getting at the same percentages, and they're going to be ready when they're ready. I'm not really worried about them taking a little bit longer. Now, again, that's an area where I could definitely stand to improve. But one of the ways that I want to improve what I'm doing with my pork, coming like full circle, the way I want to improve my pork is through breeding better pigs that are going to make better pork, that have the genetics that are going to give me better intramuscular fat depositing, and that are going to give me darker meat, because a lot of that stuff is genetic. I know the intramuscular fat, specifically the marbling, that's a genetic thing. And there are epigenetics, things that happen outside the animal that have an influence upon the genetics and how they express themselves. So right now, just my issue is that right now, I like a lot of the animals that are going to be pork for me, I am not 100% sure which ones are going to the freezer and which ones are not, because the ones that are going to the freezer, I want to put a litter or two through them to find out, like, okay, anybody who needs to be culled, then, you kind of hit puberty, get a litter out. We'll see how you do. If there are any obvious contenders where it's just like, oh yeah, that's a definite pass, then that's a pig that's going to go to pork, and we can make that decision at that point. But right now, the pork is kind of secondary to what's going on with the breeding. So I hope that convoluted spiel made a little bit of sense. Chris asked if I've tried reject apples or fruit from local orchards. Yes, I have. And there's an apple orchard near me where in the fall you can get a truckload, like pick up a truck full, and you can drive there, and you got to pick all the apples yourself. So it's anything that's on the ground. $50, you load up the apples, and off you go. I've also had various levels of success trying to repossess and repurpose pumpkins from various fall festivals and stuff like that. The apples are a good deal. It's just, it kind of takes a decent part of a day to do that. And the other thing is, it really only makes sense to use the apples if I'm finishing a certain group of pigs, because I mean, I like giving treats to all of my pigs, but like giving apples to a breeder sow, it's not really. I don't know, and maybe I have the wrong attitude about this, but the way I look at it, it's a lot of time with no real benefit. I'd rather just give them a scoop of grain and go about my business. Unless I have a cohort of pigs that I know are going to the butcher soon, and then that cohort, if they're being fed separately, and sometimes it works out that way. Like in the summertime, I had a whole group down on the pasture. They were all butcher hogs. When I had anything like that, that always preferentially went to them because they were going to the butcher, and I knew that from the outset. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of deals like that, and the same thing goes with other free supplemental things. I mentioned the whey. If there's any farms near you that make cheese, whey is really good because you can mix whey because of the lysine in there with just about anything else. Like you can use brewer's grain. I've used a decent amount of brewer's grain, and there's a lot of protein in there. It's just not bioavailable. So even though it's got like 20 something percent protein in the brewer's grain, it's not necessarily going to translate to the explosive growth that you might want. And so you have to kind of take the good with the bad when it comes to that. But the lysine is good to bolster any supplemental stuff. And if we're talking about supplemental stuff like groceries, bread, pizza crusts, anything, you have like various establishments have food waste that they want to get rid of, and they'll look for a small farm. Depending on how many pigs you have and what you're trying to do and sell, you can certainly use that stuff. But and same thing with milk. Expired milk is another thing that can be really good. My only caution would be to remember that it's a supplement, and let it be no more than like maybe 15% of their diet, and because it's going to start to potentially affect the flavor and the composition. Like for example, when you feed your pigs milk, that milk fat over time that develops and that changes the structure of the fat in the animal, such that when, like, I used to be butchering hogs, and I had a friend who would grow them out and feed them like almost entirely on milk, and they liked it. They liked the way that the quality of the fat, and they said it tasted great. So I was like, okay, whatever. But when I was cutting it, it was incredibly greasy and soft. There was no like firmness to it, where as I've found with my pigs, what I'm trying to get and what I have done with them, the consistency of the fat is very like beef fat, and it's a little more firm and tastes good, but it's not greasy. So, your mileage may vary. Sean says, I like to do 2-to-1 ratio of grain to corn. Since we usually keep our breeders and feeders together, keeps the cost lower. Exactly. I'm with you on that. That's pretty much what I'm doing. I can't be on different scripts. Ultimately, what I want to do at some point, and maybe I'll do another video one of these days where I like do an entire property tour so you guys can actually see. Maybe I'll just do some drone footage and like kind of show you where everything is. But basically, I have 10 acres in total. Knock off like 2.5 acres for the house and the driveway. So let's say I got 7 acres or thereabouts. Um, a lot of that is woods, and so basically what I would like to be able to do, like the next big investment as far as the property, is going to be to get a excavator in to make a road from the bottom, kind of where the barn is, because the barn is about, all right, so there's the road, trying to get, okay, so there's road here, and then there's the pasture up to here, and then there's the barn here, and then kind of this is like half of the property. What am I doing here? Everything's backwards. I'm sorry. So we got like half of the property is like road, pasture, barn, and then goes up the hill. Thank you, sweetie. I got, then above the barn is like another 4 or 5 acres of, I don't want to call it silvopasture because there's nothing pasture about it. It's rugged. There's some good mast up there. And there's a lot that I can do up there, but right now my big limiting factor is that I can't get up there with a tractor because it's way too steep and rocky and tree-y and hole-y. What I need to do is pay a guy with a bulldozer to come out here, make me a road, make me an army worthy of Mordor. I need him to I need to be able to go up the hill with a little Kubota. And then once you kind of go up the hill, then the pigs can terraform everything to their liking. There's some massive rock piles, but there's some nice flat areas too. There's some nice wallows up there. There's some nice trees. So there's a lot more. And what I would like to do, I want to try to have separate areas for the pigs so that I can have breeders in one area, and then you go up the hill and that's your feeders. And then that way it's like, feeders are on this program. We feed them this feed, this much, this often. And then the breeders, we're feeding them this feed, this much, this often. And you can keep them separated. But right now, everybody's kind of in the barn. I'll tell you about what I'm doing for kind of an experiment, because you might have seen a short that I put out a couple of weeks ago about the my old line Tamworths that I just got from a fella over in New York State. And these Tams are very hardy, and they were living in, if I could call it this, and I mean no disrespect in saying this, but they were living in fairly austere conditions. And they're also quite hairy, because like old line breeds, their genetics predispose them to being hairy so that they can survive outdoors. So they almost look like, wild boar or wild pigs. And so when I brought them in, rather than just kind of, since there was like mama, who's like 3-4 years old, and then there's 2 babies that are like 3-4 months old, and they already kind of knew each other. They've been living in the same cohort for a while. What I did is I put them down on the pasture, which is like way away from the barn, and they went out there and they're living their best life in porta huts. And with rain, snow, all this stuff, the porta huts are so far rain, snow, wind, everything in between, like looking good. Just throw a little more hay in there, call it a day. Because I found an area where the drainage works on the property. And if you can get decently drained area, then you just kind of pile up bedding. And as the bedding decomposes in the dirt floor, that decomposition is going to actually bring up warmth that's going to dry up the pigs and dry up the stuff on top. And you just keep adding on. They pack it down, decomposes, generates heat. And it's actually a good system for them. And so I'm going to be, well, again, that's a few $1,000s that I don't have right now. But what I would like to do is get a couple more porta huts, and really develop the winter pasture cohort and kind of do that a little bit just to kind of learn the moves. Because the reality is, keeping pigs in the pasture where you're not having to like scrape stuff and sprinkle barn lime and like scoop up turds, you just go down there and you dump the feed, and they got the whole pasture. They can take a dump wherever they want to, and snow is going to kind of neutralize that in the spring. We'll move them off, move them up the hill, plant some stuff there. Everything will get neutralized and it'll be good to go. And we're not having to do work. So you may remember earlier in the STREAM, I mentioned that my current breed stock are in my weaning pen. And so I am going to go for it probably over this weekend, and I'm going to try to run them down to the pasture to make friends with my my 3 tams, and I'm going to try to get them in there and open up my weaning pen, which is adjacent to the barn, so that I can cut and wean my 2 litters of babies that got to get out of here, so that I can collect that payment for those piglets, so that I can buy my next shipment of feed. It's always something or other. But the more I can do that and kind of decentralize so that it's not everybody in the barn, and that's like this big sticking point. If I can get more satellite areas set up and hardened off so that they are more livable, it'll be great. And the other thing is, in the pasture, like, the pigs eat the snow. They don't have access to a nipple drinker with the water. I mean, it gets down to like single digits at night, but there's a runoff that's going through there, and I can either, break it up a little bit if I need to. Like, if it freezes over, I can break it up, or they'll break it up and they'll get to the water, or they'll just eat the snow. And I mean, I do have a nipple drinker water that they have access to. So if for some reason they needed a different water setup, that would be something I could do. But it's just kind of one more point about the ease, in some ways, the ease of raising the pigs on the pasture. But you just got to set it up right. That you got to measure twice, cut once. But if you get it measured out right and it's set up right, it works for you. Again, same thing with your sow herd. You cull ruthlessly and get rid of the mamas that need the hand holding, then it sucks to have to do that. But then once you do that, then you got animals that are doing the work for you. And then your animals are working for you. You're not working for them. Where are we here? All right. So, moving on to my next portion, I see we got a whole, well, I was just going to say we got 5 people in the chat. We got 2 extra people who were just checking it out, but I missed telling them to subscribe. So here we are. It's the 3 of you guys that are here hanging out with me. I really appreciate you all. Hamburger asked me, made a comment about, on one of my posts about, getting started in 2026, and kind of was something, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so apologies if I get some of this a little bit, maybe a little bit off. But basically it was like, it's really hard to make any money as a small scale farmer. And I don't want to be evil, big ag type of industrial farming. I don't have the money for that, so I can't do that. I need to find a model where I can make money farming, but I'm not sure how I can do that with animals, because Hamburger was telling me, hey, I can see some of like the pick your own farms where people can come in and it's sort of community based, and everybody is kind of, from each according to his need, to each according to his ability type of thing, and everybody kind of helps and it's communal. With the pick your own vegetable stuff, but he's like, I'm not sure how that would translate to what you do with livestock, and trying to figure out how to make that go. So I hope I'm getting the gist of that question or comment right, because land is hard to come by, and there's farms are all going to be different based on where you are, what you're growing, what your situation is, what the weather is like in your part of the country, etc. So I can give you my take on that. Some of it's going to be too specific to my situation or my area. It's not going to be relevant to you. But there might be some gems mixed in with the dung that you can kind of gain from there in terms of getting started in 2026. So the first thing is that, like, the first rule with farming, and again, I'm making a little bit of an assumption here because I don't know if my guy Hamburger is coming from a position like kind of a hippie commune-ish position or not. And I'm just kind of going based on text written in the comment. But the biggest thing that I would say starting off in 2026 is run the business tightly and be profitable. If you can't be profitable doing it, you're not going to be able to do it, and it's not going to work. And the way to benefit your community is to be a strong leader with a strong vision of what you want done, how you want it done, and to maintain enough control over your business so that you can serve your community, so that you can listen to your community, and so that you can be agile enough in your decision making to do what is going, so that you can meet the need and the needs of the people who are relying on you, and that it is not a bad thing to be profitable and to make profitability the focus of what you're doing on your farm. The idea that it's got to be like a hippie commune and we got to have everybody doing a little bit here and there. I can tell you, like, do a little research on the Jamestown colony and kind of how that went. You need to have centralized leadership and you need to make it profitable. And along with that, it needs to be profitable as you grow so that your growth does not outpace your profitability. So start as small as you need to start in order to figure out how to be profitable. So if you're raising 2 pigs, 3 pigs, 4 pigs, maybe, like I started out with 4 pigs, male and female as breeder, and 2 cut males for pork. That was my pork farm. And with that, I added 2 more sows because I like the Durocs and I wanted to throw some, fun genetics in there. But 6 pigs, that was it. Here we are a couple years later. Now we got like 1 million. But the point is, I have been very deliberate in the way that I have been growing things because I'm only growing a little bit and expanding as profitability permits me to do so without having to worry about jeopardizing the whole operation or things going poorly. Now, in 2026, with land prices being what they are, there's a couple ideas because, people talk about farming. If you are just kind of completely new to the game and you want to get your feet wet, I would recommend posting on Facebook, go knock on some doors if there are any farms in your community or within a, half-hour drive from where you live, and go ask some farmers, hey, can I work with you a little bit? Like, do you have any jobs? Or, hey, I'll even volunteer. Michael, if you're still here in the chat, Michael attended one of my classes and has been a subscriber here for a minute, Bolino's Bounty. He's always ready to come over and lend a hand because he wants to kind of get his feet wet and see what's going on. And that's a really good way to learn stuff because you can see the breeds of animals. You can see the decisions. You can say, oh, this matches up with what I want to do. This does not. And you can have that information so that you can measure twice and cut once. And that's a really important thing. And then the other thing is that in terms of farming, if you don't want to roll your effort into, working or volunteering for another farm to get started, but you want your own thing, I think it's reasonable to, depending on where you're located physically in the country, I would say it could be a very good idea to lease a little bit of land from a farmer, because there's tons of old farms that, the farmers who own that land, they're too old to, be wrangling cattle and doing pigs and all the rest of that stuff, but they would love to see their land still be used for something. And so, yeah, you still have to, get their buy-in and their approval. You got to find the right fit, but you could probably find a farmer who's got a field where you can say, look, I'm going to move them around. I'm going to rotate the animals through the pasture so they're not going to dig everything up. I live close enough by. I'm going to come by and feed them. They're going to have, electric to keep them in. And then you can rotate them through whatever the paddock is. Let's say it's 1 acre. You can strip graze them and just move that line over one, maybe 10, 15 feet every couple of days. And then that way they can, they're not exposed to the entire area all at once. They kind of focus their impact, and then you can replant as they go. And by the time they work their way back around to the starting point, they're, everything has kind of started to take shape again and regrow. And then you mow it down for another go around. And, if you start doing that in the spring, especially if you get like started piglets that are like, let's say 3 months old, you can give them another 3.5, 4 months of doing that. You can put them in the freezer. By the time it's fall, late summer, and there you go. You don't really need much in terms of shelter. You could cobble something together, like basically, I like porta huts, because being in New Hampshire where there's like winter and I'm keeping my animals year round out on pasture in some cases, I want a porta hut because it's made from like culvert pipe type of material and very stout. Pigs can't move it around. Snow goes right off of it. Very, very structurally sound. Um, but what I would say is, if you're in an area where you're only going to have them like maybe until the fall, you can take like a hog panel and just kind of bend that over like a U shape, a U turned upside down. And you frame out a little floor with 2x4s or 2x6s or whatever. And you kind of make that, reinforce the corners a little, make it nice. And then just like put a tarp over that with some zip ties so that way they have a spot to go in and out of the rain. It's light enough that you and one other person can move it, right? You have like kind of a temporary type of thing that is portable, and that works great for, even in New England, you can do that for like 6 months out of the year, which gives you plenty of time if you buy started piglets, where you can do 2 piglets, 2 pigs your first year, you got one for yourself, and then sell each half to somebody else. If you get them USDA, you can sell individual cuts to other people. You can develop a little bit of a market, develop a little bit of buzz, and then you have people that are invested in what you're doing. And next year you can do 5 pigs, you can do 10 pigs, and you have a little bit of a business, and it's growing in that direction. It's not as simple as, you don't necessarily have to buy a farm and a barn and all the rest of that stuff. You can go in with a handful of people, and hell, if you do a good job with that and you're making a name, you can find people who own land who are not working it, where you can say, look, like, let's work together. You can get credit for having your farmland being used. I can grow some of the stuff that I want. Maybe you give him one of the pigs butchered, and he'll let you do it. I mean, there's a lot of different arrangements that can be accomplished, but you have to get out there and you have to start trying a little bit. Got a couple more questions in here. But basically, the short answer is large scale. Like, one of the things that makes it hard, and this question is really good because it highlights the challenge of farming, that there's a lot of obstacles that small farmers can't get over. Like, you don't really have a lot of medium farms, you have very small farms like homesteads where people are just raising a little bit for themselves. And then you have mega farms that are like enormous, but farms that are kind of like in between, that are kind of going through the phases to get from A to B. That kind of doesn't happen. And so it's important to understand that you have to educate customers and build a community, and you have to do it a little bit at a time, because it's not just as simple as I'm going to put out a little sign and start selling bacon and people are just going to come and buy it. Like, you have to actually build a relationship with the community, build a relationship with people who want what you're offering. But there's a lot of people out there that want it. People are interested in that. So I don't think it's a lost cause by any stretch of the imagination. And there's ways to, go in with a couple of friends where it's like, you split some of the costs and the materials, and you can make that stuff happen together. And it is January 1. My computer just said
35 seconds.
Well, they're behind. 30. My wife's showing me the thing on the from New York City. They're live streaming too. There's a delay. Because it just went 1 a.m. Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year, babe. Love you, babe. And another thing that's just worth pointing out, like whatever that we're doing in farming, something that is really hard to quantify in this calculus is always to keep in mind that like your family can, like, farming can either be something that's really great for your family if you have, I want to write air quotes because, I'm not trying to, stick it to anybody who is married to somebody who does not support or enjoy farming. And I understand that it's different for everybody, but like, I know that what I do with the animals, it's really beneficial to me to have a wife who is able to kind of hear what I'm saying and see it from a different perspective, where she's not all like, oh, they're so cute, let's just get 20 of them. Why are we getting 10? Let's get another 10. Let's get 20. Like, she's a little bit more the glass half empty. And this past year with the pork that we finished and got butchered and sold, it was like kind of the first, we did 8 pigs in a group that went to the USDA. Like, she was impressed with the pork and she was like, wow, this is good. I want more of this. I was like, I can die happy. Like, when my wife is like legitimately impressed with something that I've done, I know that doesn't happen easily. And the people that are closest to you, it makes a huge difference. But yeah, and Happy New Year to all of you guys. I really appreciate that. So a couple questions in here. Bellino's Bounty says, still here, and it's great getting real experience. There's only so much YouTube and books can offer. Totally agree. Sean says, has anyone ever raised your piglets as breeding stock? How many boars do you have? What age is your oldest pig? Okay, so people do raise my piglets as breeding stock. I have not stayed in touch with people a ton because up until recent about breeding stock, because like I haven't sold a lot of breeding stock. A lot of the breeding stock that I've sold, like there's one boar of mine that, a couple of boars actually, excuse me, that I've kept track of. But in terms of females, they've all just been kind of not purebred, or they're like good looking crosses, pick of the litter, and they're good breeding animals, but not animals where I have a genetic heritage and plan for them and I want to keep track of what they're doing. They're just animals that have gone to be breeders. And well, actually that's not true. I do have another one that I haven't heard from him in a while. I should reach out to him. But yeah, there are 2 boars of mine that I follow pretty closely what they've been up to, and they've gotten both. One of them is old spot, purebred old spot, unregistered. The other one is a cross. And both of them have gotten really good marks from their owner. So I've been real happy about that. But I'm not at a point with selling breed stock yet where I'm like, there are some people where it's like how much you charge for a gilt, like a female piglet, and it's like $700-800 for a piglet because it's from the fudge bloodline, or and then there's some names in certain breed lineages that are very widely renowned. I don't draw that kind of water, so my animals are nowhere near that expensive. Or I mean, they're not anything to sneeze at. They're not shabby, but they're they don't get that much money. In terms of the boars that I have a purebred Tam and a purebred Old Spot, both registered with papers. I have a purebred Berkshire, and then I have a son of my Old Spot boar, and I'm gonna dad Old Spot. I'm gonna try to move him along, because I don't really need registered Old Spots. I just want the genetics to be able to cross in to make some good meat crosses. I'm not interested in like developing and expanding an Old Spot specific herd for the sake of selling them. So like the whole registration thing is kind of, it's not of much use to me. But he's 2 years old. He's a very good looking boar. Um, he's good and meaty. He's not. I mean, he's all my animals are a little bit on the husky side this time of year, but he's not like, you can tell like he's broad shoulders, big arms, like he's a power lifter. He's not a bodybuilder, but he doesn't look like he's a desk jockey either. And so there's various gradations of like the body quality. And the oldest pig that I have right now is 4 years, coming up on 5. And she's one of the ones that's kind of on the bubble for getting culled, although I love her. It's hard to let her go because she's like the only one of my very first group of piglets that I bought. So it's kind of hard for me to, think about putting her into sausage. But as long as she's still healthy and, she's still having piglets, I say let her roll, and, again, I'm not running everything that I do strictly with business. It's not like impersonal where it's just like, hey, you missed this mark, you didn't have this many babies, you're going to sausage. With some of them, I have a little different relationship with some of the animals where there's some. I have a soft spot for some of the animals, and that's the way I like doing it. I don't like having to be completely impersonal with them. Bellino's Bounty says, so many only want to talk about the good, not inherently wrong, but I think that's what kills the drive of most people, is thinking you either need a lot of land or that it's easy until the first problem, and then they give up. Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, one thing that I learned back in the day when I used to climb, and I'll link in the description after this is done, my climbing content from a former life back when I used to be a climber. But one of the things that always used to kind of make me chuckle a little bit is that climbing movies, when you would sit on your couch and you would watch a climbing movie, you get this very strong feeling. It's very evocative and emotional when you're like kind of sweaty palms and like, ooh, this is exciting. It's beautiful. Like, and then that moment of exhilaration where they're like holding on by their fingertips and it's like, ooh, they barely stick it and they get it, or they fall off and they missed it. And then they have to come back and try again, or they get injured, all that kind of thing. But then when you're actually out there doing it, there's a lot of strong feelings, but it does not feel anything in reality like what it feels like watching it. Just completely worlds apart. And one of the things that I will talk about here before we're all done with this stream, I hope, is kind of the role of influencing influencers, farm tubers, and all of that. And that's one of the things that I think can be a downside with YouTube that I think people need to be aware of, is that like no matter how hard I try, even if I try to go out of my way to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I feel like I have done that. Like I have a short that I posted last winter, I think called Farming Ugly. just talking about how, like, during mud season and everything is just slop and the pigs are wet. It's just wet everywhere and it's pouring rain and it's just a mess. Um, that's something that I think is, even if you're trying to show everything as objectively as possible, you have to present things from a perspective. You can't be omniscient. You always have to put it from your perspective. And so the things that look a certain way to you or that catch your interest or catch your eye that you want to show. And there's, a lot of movies that I've seen or videos that I've seen in the homestead space about modern homesteading is a lie. And I think that's a little bit excessive because it's not a lie. It's a portrayal. It's a artistic expression or rendition of something that ultimately there's not a substitute in terms of content. Content is programming. It's created. It's a story that is artistically crafted. And even if you're doing your best to be sincere and transparent about, shortcomings, it is what it is. And so I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I always try to encourage people, like to Hamburger's question there about trying to get started in 2026 when land and it's just hard, everything's hard as a small farmer. And I agree with that. The big benefit is you want to start with something that seems so easy that, like, you can't possibly screw it up. Like, just do the easiest possible iteration of something that does not come even close to exhausting any of your resources, and then do that for a year through an entire life cycle of that animal. And you're going to find stuff where you're going to be like, ooh, that would have been a real pain in the butt if I had had a whole bunch of animals. If I had, more animals, this would have been big problem. And then that gives you a little more information, but go slowly, go gradually. All right. I have a question here from the peanut gallery. Yes, sir.
Are you going to be done with your video?
It's going to be a little while. Why? What do you need?
I was just wondering when you were going to be done doing your video.
Okay. It's going to be a little bit. I'll let you know, okay? It won't be that long, but it won't be for a little bit yet. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, yep, I got help, so that's good. All right. A couple of questions that Sean asked, and I think I covered some of this, was like what drives me in farming, kind of the why behind it all. And I've covered the whole COVID story, the pandemic, and all of that. At the end of the day, I spent a lot of years climbing, literally risking my life to do something that it mattered to me, but ultimately there was no benefit to the world. Like, nobody needs some dingus to go climbing up a mountain and take pictures and videos and, hey, look at me, I'm so cool, like I climbed this mountain. Nobody needs that, and I kind of got to a point during the pandemic where I realized that, hey, that negotiation with adversity, which is kind of how I classify extreme sports and climbing, it was valuable because it was a good vehicle for learning how to deal with adversity, and to take adversity and to make something creative and useful. But then the next stage, when I was looking at what am I going to pass down to my family, to my kids, that's where farming kind of became the next obvious thing. And like I said earlier, the why is more a matter of I just can't not do it because I like the animals. Like, I like it. I don't have a big deep reason. Maybe you could say it's in my soul. I'm programmed to do this. It's in my blood somewhere. I think I know my dad's side there were farmers, and my mom was Scots Irish. So I know there's farmers in there somewhere. But I like to eat, and I like to do things that actually matter, and it's very satisfying to raise good quality animals and to see them healthy and happy and content, and to know that, like, you're taking 2 animals and you're making 14 animals out of that, and it's like, wow, that's cool. Like, I got to make that happen. It's just like growth. it's really exciting. You get to, and of course, there's no livestock without dead stock. So there's also a part of that where you have to be tough and you have to understand that, in farming, you have really good days that just feel great. And you're like, man, nobody would understand like how nice it is to walk out to the barn and to see a litter of piglets just sitting there. Mama's got everybody buttoned up and the babies are nursing and placenta's out and mama looks good. And it's like, it's amazing. And you try to post it on Facebook and people are like, oh, they're cute. That's nice. But they don't understand that like this is the culmination of like 3 months of kind of, fretting about like every detail of their food and their housing and their temperature and their water and making sure everything is good. And then it's just like it happens and it's beautiful, So yeah, that's why I do this. And it's farming for me. I have found in this last year, especially, it's a repetition thing. Like it's not a thing where you do this and now I'm there. It's like you do it and then you got to do it again. And when you're done doing that, then you got to do it again and do it again. And it's doing reps. And the more reps you do, the easier you can do those reps, which allows you to add more weight because you're not working as hard to accomplish the same amount, but it requires you to do the same thing over and over and over without getting tired or getting out over your skis in order to get to that point. And that's not something that I think is, common practice for what people are looking at. It's not what it looks like on Instagram, certainly, but there are those moments. Those moments definitely exist. There's beautiful stuff in farming, absolutely. And the other thing too is like I like the idea of improving my land. You may see this book here, Dirt to Soil. One of these days I'm going to do maybe a live stream where I'm going to go on and on about some of the books that I really have found beneficial. But one of the things that I have really interested me is, excuse me, how I can make and improve my, like the ecosystem on my farm and how the pigs can disturb the ground, how they can fertilize it, how that attracts birds. Like not this past year, but the year before, I was reading up about sunflowers, and sunflowers are used to detoxify, I think, nuclear waste sites because they can convert like mercury and all kinds of chemicals. They can basically rinse the soil and cleanse the soil of all kinds of fairly substantial impurities. And I was like, well, I can get a bag of black oil sunflower seeds for next to nothing at the farm store. So I just tilled or disc harrowed a whole bunch of that stuff down in the pasture. And then when all those sunflowers grew up, then we had birds in there, we had turkeys in there, and it was this whole big thing. And the pigs went in there and they enjoyed knocking some of that stuff down too. But just being able to work your land, it's like, what's the point of having 10 acres? And that is one of the things when you buy a farm. It's like, well, you have 10 acres. Like, there's no point in having 10 acres if you're going to sit in your house and play video games, because like you could like have a much smaller maintenance cost and commitment and smaller mortgage payment and all that stuff if you're not going to actually do something where you're improving the land and then the land kind of helps pay you back. So that's a big thing, like improving the soil, which is something that I will admit I am very, very green when it comes, like wet behind the ears, not experienced, not an expert, but I am learning about kind of do more of this, do less of that, and also like being careful with the pigs, because pigs can be very destructive, and you got to be careful that they don't, go nuts and too much of a good thing, and then you wind up having to fix stuff that they did wrong. And I've been kind of learning that, like keeping them away from the trees so they don't dig up the roots and mess things up. So that's a big part of it. So another question that I got from Sean a little bit ago, and I apologize for taking this long. How long are we going here? What's the time frame? 2 hours and 6 minutes. Okay, well that's not bad. Biggest changes and evolution since I started farming, and there's kind of two things that I would, and they're related. One of the things that has changed a lot is my mindset about breeds and kind of where I stand on, kind of the breeds that I am working with and that I want to work with and how I feel about different breeds. And then the other one is kind of how I feel about medication, antibiotics, wormers, vaccines, that type of thing. And I can tell you that a lot of the conversation tonight from my end has been driven by the fact that this past year and a half or so has been a time of expansion. And that when you expand, you're stress testing what you're doing. And so when you have 5 pigs and you go to 20 pigs, it the two do not resemble each other hardly at all. And there are things that you can do with 5 pigs and completely get away with that if you do those exact same things with 20 pigs, you're going to be getting punished and your animals are going to suffer and everything's going to be going to hell in a handcart. Now, as I have said before, all farms are different and people are farming in different ways because of different constraints, different resources, different assets. And a big thing to consider that's going to be different for every farm is what level of intervention do you want to have? In other words, my pigs are out in the barn. There's no heat. I have lights. There's a little bit of electricity for, to keep the water flowing in the barn, but dirt floors. There's no like manure field that collects everything and, like they have with some of the big dairy farms where they have the manure all gets like kind of sucked out or like smashed through the cracks in the floor and everything is very chip and pin. My farm is kind of old fashioned, not because it's better, but because that's what I have to work with. And so I'm going to try to make the best out of what I have to work with. And there's some things that if I could upgrade, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a barn that has concrete floors and that has some heat in it. Like that would be pretty cool. But there's pros and cons to all of that. And the thing is, when you have 5, 6 animals and you're starting off, and you're on 10 acres, so 5 animals on 10 acres, there's very low pressure because it's not like there's been animals there before. So I'm starting off and I bring these animals onto this property. There's very little biological pressure on the soil, meaning the animals that are going out into the pasture, they're not stepping on last year's turds from the pigs that went to market in the fall. They're like, it's fresh, it's clean, they can dig around, they can root. And I mean, there's still some parasites, but it's far less in terms of the risk and all of that stuff. And so what I feel like when I started out, and this kind of rolls into the next question that also came from Sean about like who I started off listening to when I got into farming. A lot of it certainly was Joel Salatin. I listened to Sheridan Park Farms. I'm going to make a full video about this stuff with a little bit more brevity at some point. Justin Rhodes, Homesteady. There's a handful of good channels that are good to kind of get ideas for what you're doing. But one of the things that I learned is that when you're raising, you got fresh land and a small manageable number of animals, very low pressure on the land, you can get away with a lot. And so there's a lot of people who, kind of come out there and they're all like, oh, I don't use ivermectin. I only use diatomaceous earth and pumpkin seeds because like we're like organic. And so we do it this way. And on some level, like if you have enough land, like if you have 50 acres and you can use 10 acres, maybe you have, 20 or 30 pigs, but you can use a different 10-acre section every year. And like you're going through a 5-year rotation, you might be able to do something that's minimally interventive where you're not having to give a lot of shots. You're not having to deal with worming. You're not having to be as strict about some of these management practices. But when you have there's a big difference when you go from having a couple of pigs to having a herd, because having a couple of pigs, you have an individual relationship with all of them, and everything is very much kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and it's very casual. When you have a herd, there's a group, we have to have order. It's kind of like, when you're newly married and you can, stay up late, drink a little beer, have some pizza, play some video games, watch a movie, goof around and then sleep in. When you have kids, and especially when you have a couple of kids, and you want to just go ahead and sleep in, and you want to do, like, you can't just be like, okay, guys, do your own thing. I'm going to sleep in and whatever. Like, you have to manage the family. You're managing a family. It's not just you and me are hanging out and we're cool. It's you're managing a family. This is a lot more involved. And that's kind of the way it is with pigs. Like, if you have a couple of pigs, it's like, diatomaceous earth, it's good enough. They're good health. I don't have to worry about that. But you put, 20 pigs on a relatively small piece of land. Yeah, your diatomaceous earth and your pumpkin seeds, no, not going to work. And I've butchered animals that have been raised that way with very, very proud owners that are like, oh, we don't use ivermectin because that's just like, chemicals and big ag and evil pharmaceutical companies. And it's like, yeah, and your, 8-month-old pig weighs about as much as my, like, golden retriever. Like, come on, dude. Like, meds and vaccines and all of that stuff, it's not bad. And this is something that, again, my perspective on this has changed a lot because, like I said, when I first started, I was starting out very small, and I was like, I don't want to have to do any more, spend any more, medicate any more than I absolutely have to. And so I'm going to go bare minimum intervention and just let nature kind of do its thing. And there's an extent to which that still is my focus, but what happens is, excuse me, when you have to deal with a sick animal, you have an animal that dies, you have an animal that gets a reproductive disease, and when they're farrowing, their babies come out dead. There's a lot of different things like that can happen. You start to rethink, okay, like, I just put 6 months into kind of raising this animal and then another 3 months into gestational period, and now they had a litter of stillborn mummified babies that, and then you talk to some people and they're like, oh yeah, that's PRRS, which is reproductive condition. And it's like, yeah, you could give them what's the name of that, FarrowSure Gold or Litter Guard. I think Litter Guard is the other one. There's a couple of vaccines, and it's like you just give it to them like once or twice, and then they're good to go, and then you don't have to worry about it. It's like, okay, I can see the point of doing that. But with a small number of animals, or even a larger number of animals, but a lot of land, it doesn't always look that way. And so the idea of kind of being lax with the medical, the record keeping, and really managing the herd instead of just kind of, well, let's do a little of this and a little bit of that. Because right now, and I'm kind of like on that bubble, I'm just starting to go from, like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the stream, I don't know if anybody remembers this, I mentioned that I have a couple of sick animals. I have one animal, she's got mycoplasma arthritis. Basically, it's a, infection in the joints. Her back hocks, lower legs are swollen. I gave her a relatively powerful antibiotic, not really an antibiotic, but like antifungal, but not, that's the wrong name for it. But basically, a pretty strong medication for that about a week ago. And, it made some improvements, and I'm kind of treating her. But where I'm at now is like, okay, this is the second time I have had mycoplasma arthritis. So it's in my herd. Not last summer, but the summer before. 2 years ago, my big boar, Pygnaceous, he had it. He almost died. And he was... Excuse me. Here we are. He was down and out for like a month. and I had to like drag the hose over to him and stick it in his mouth and spray it in his mouth so he would get some water. I was like dumping feed right next to him, and he would just like kind of try to take a little bite. I mean, I thought he was going to die. And that's, you lose your boar, like everything comes to a grinding halt, because then you got to get a new animal in there and kind of get them integrated into the herd, and it's a problem. And so now it's like, okay, you know what? I could just give all of my breeding animals, and it's a little different with animals that are going to the freezer, but like the animals that I know are breeders that are going to not be going to somebody else's freezer, I don't have an issue with eating animals that are vaccinated. At the end of the day, like that's a whole nother conversation that we could have. I understand a lot of my customers and a lot of other farmers, they don't want feeder pigs that have that stuff. So I'm more than happy to defer. Less work for me to do. I'm happy to do that. But any breed stock, animals that are going to be around long enough to have a chance to catch something, with like feeder pigs, they're at risk for like a month, kind of like the third month. Once they're weaned up until like month 4, and that they make that transition from wherever I am at to whatever farm they're going to, if they make it through that month, that first month of being weaned, generally speaking, they're going to be good to go. And I don't think it's worth doing the vaccination or whatever. You can just kind of spot treat any animal that gets sick and take care of them from there. But like with breeders, it's like these are animals that have been here for a couple of years, that are going to be here, hopefully, Lord willing, for a couple more years. Instead of having to worry about like, oh, who's sick today, or like the weather's kind of taking a turn, it's got warm and humid. Now I need to go deal with, somebody coming down with something. I can just say, you know what? They got their vaccination. They're good. I don't have to worry about this disease. And there's still things, you can't vaccinate for everything, but it's like when I see something pop up in my animals, then it's like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to give them a vaccine if they're a breeder and they're going to be here long term, because I don't want to have to be medicating and treating an animal when there's something that's clearly here that can come up. And it's like, every couple of years, it's not that much, but I want to keep my breeders healthy. And so, yeah, my perspective on that has definitely changed a lot, because it was, there's a lot of hysteria around the use of antibiotics and medication, and certainly those things can be overused and that can be done poorly. And I get that, but at the end of the day, I don't want my animals suffering, and I want to have a good herd that's healthy. And so there's a balance. It's nuanced. I'm not going to just go give everybody every vaccination just because. It's like, if I see something that is popping up in my herd, we're going to do something to make sure that gets dealt with. And a vaccination is, a longer standing solution than just medicating it with antibiotics in the short term. That gives us a little bit more reach. And then the last thing is kind of with breeds. I've had me and Mr. Bellino's Bounty over here. We've had a lot of conversations about which breeds are best. And at the end of the day, this might ruffle some feathers too, but like I don't really think the breed matters as much as the classification of breed. There's like 3 classifications. There's like industrial, which are like your white hogs, Yorkshire, landrace, the pink pigs, Yorkshire pink pig with the pointy ears, landrace pink pig with the floppy ears, and then Duroc. These are all the animals that have been bred in and for confinement housing. You can usually get them relatively cheap. They grow really fast. They don't put on fat. They're cheaper, but their genetics are not necessarily tailored to surviving on dirt outside in the winter. But you can get them cheap, so you can buy enough so that you can afford to lose a few, and then, they're not bad pigs, but those are like your industrial brands. Sorry. And then the heritage breeds are, Berkshire, Hampshire. And to be fair, some of these heritage breeds have been crossed into industrial breeds as well. So it's not like all industrial pigs are completely isolated from heritage breeds. But you're not going to find purebred Tamworths in most of the hog barns in Iowa. You're going to find Durocs, Yorkshires. Those are going to be like those types of crosses that are going to give you big maternal output. You have like 18, 20 piglets in a litter. The Duroc genetics are going to have them growing fast. They're long. They got an extra rib because the Yorkshires have that genetic thing where they have an extra rib and they're longer. Lots of bacon. Don't put on much fat. And the Duroc genes, you can feed them cardboard and paper and they'll just like, you can feed them pretty much anything and they'll put on weight like crazy. And then the heritage breeds, of course, Berkshire, Tamworth, there's a handful of them. I mean, you can do your own research, the Hamps. And then there are old line Durocs that I would consider like a heritage breed, because the Durocs that are in the production now, back before they got bred into the abomination that they have become for the sake of doing well in containment in factory farms, they were very good performing, high performing, fast growing, well marbled animals that were, very good out in pasture and very hardy. And there are some breeders that have old line Durocs still, and old line Yorks, and old line, you name it, old line Berkshires and whatnot. But the heritage breeds, Tamworth, I would include Old Spot with that. And then kind of I hate the term lard breed, but I mean, the lardier pigs, they are, the pigs that will more readily convert grain into fat rather than grain into protein. And those are going to be like your Ossabaw, American Guinea Hog, Coonies, Idaho Pasture Pigs, Mangalitsa, Maishans, I think technically would be kind of one of those. I would call them like a boutique breed, because like it's a specialty breed. They're not bad and they can have really good quality pork, but you got to feed them correctly and you got to be very judicious in the way you do that. Because if you just, take a bunch of bags of cracked corn and throw them at your Maishon, you're going to wind up with a real fatty pig. And you're going to have these tiny little pork chops and you're going to have a whole bunch of fat and you're going to be losing a whole bunch of money. And you're going to, and this is what happens. People don't realize that there's nuance to the way that you feed different breeds. And ultimately, what is best? If you're starting out, what's best? I'll make this real simple. If you're starting out, what's best is a good cross. Purebred mom, purebred dad, different breeds. Doesn't matter which two breeds that you like. You cross them, you get an F1 first generation hybrid. Not a cross that's been crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed and recrossed. Purebred mom, purebred dad, first generation hybrid. That animal is going to grow like 15% faster. There's actual studies that I don't have in front of me, but that actually back it up. But they grow about 15 to 20% faster, and they're also hardier. And temperament-wise, they're good, and you get a lot of the benefits of both. Like, for example, if you cross a Duroc with a Mangalitsa. Mangalitsas are kind of that specialty fatty pig. Again, if you feed them wrong, they're going to be lard pigs. If you feed them correctly, they're still going to be smaller, and they're going to have a higher propensity towards converting grain into fat. But you cross that with some Duroc genetics, then you're going to get, again, it's going to grow a little bit faster and you're going to have some better things. The things with the specialty breeds too is that you also have to factor in the time frame. And so the thing, what it comes down to, yes, hybrid vigor, heterosis. Yes. Thank you, Sean. Right on the money. It's about figuring out what is the right fit for your market and for your operation. because your operation needs to serve your market. So let's take, for example, the case study of the Idaho pasture pig. So a lot of big YouTubers, pigs are out there fussing. They're fighting. Well, the Idaho pasture pigs, they used to. There's a lot of big YouTubers that made a fuss about, is this the perfect homestead pig? And what happens is people are like, I'm starting off with pigs, Idaho pasture pigs. Wow, they can be grass fed. They don't need any grain. Like, there's all these good things. Their temperament is so nice. They have good marbling. They're, easy to work with. They don't dig up my pasture. Great. So, you can, you buy a bunch of Idaho pasture pigs, and then the problem is you forgot to read the fine print where it's like, oh, it takes like 14 to 16 months to finish those pigs out. And you can't make them grow faster by giving them more grain, because if you give them more grain, you're just going to get a fatter pig, and you're still going to be waiting 14, 16 months to get the meat that you want in there. And you'll find that out when you try to butcher your fat pig and find out that it's all fat. And then people get angry, and it's like, oh, these are terrible pigs. And it's like, well, it's got to be the right fit for the right situation. You have to have a market for it. And same thing with selling piglets. Like, people are breeding Idaho pasture pigs. I see this all the time here in New Hampshire. People are, oh, I have this litter of Idaho pasture pig, Kune cross for sale. And then it's like $150 a piece, cut, weaned, and they give all the bona fides of the parents and like all this good stuff. And then it's like, you see them post again a week later, oh, I'm going to reduce the price by $25 a piglet. And like, they're trying to give them away by the time it's all done. And it's, sweetie, I'm going to put you down. Okay. Here.
I love you.
I love you, sweetie. Run along. I'll be right there, sweetie. It doesn't matter what you do. You gotta, if you don't have a market for those animals, you're not going to be able to talk people who are looking for a Yorkshire or a Duroc. They want something that's kind of industrial standard. You're not going to talk them into buying a Kune pig off of you because, oh, well, it's so environmentally friendly and it's so nice and blah, blah, blah. They're like, yeah, I don't want a pig that I have to take through the winter just to put it in the freezer. That's a hard pass. And again, it's not that it can't be done. It's got to be the right fit. So, I think finding the best fit in what you raise and how you raise it, and understanding that that is something that is going to change and should change as your scale changes. So, for example, like, I raised a couple of Mangalitsa Old Spot crosses, great pigs. And when I was just doing that for myself and my family and, for a couple other coworkers at the hospital, it was good. But if I were trying to factor that into the operation that I have going on now, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't fit. So you have to look at what makes sense, what the market wants, and then figure out how you can meet that need. And again, start small, expand gradually, because you want to make mistakes when you are not expanded so that you can avoid compounding a mistake. Small mistakes, easy to correct. If you go all in on something and you don't measure twice and cut once and you just go for it, you can wind up making a big mistake that costs you for a long time and hurts your reputation. Somebody wants to buy a pig from you and it takes 18 months for them to get that pig. And they're like, what the heck? That's not good word on the street. So again, it's marketing. If you know how to market and build a market for that product, hey, then you can be as loyal as you want to those Idaho pasture pigs or those Mangalitsa's. Like, there's a guy up here in New Hampshire. He's a big Mangalitsa guy. Armstrong. I forget his first name. I think Kyle Armstrong. Great guy. And he knows his onions. And he's built a market where he does excellent with the Mangalitsa's. There's a lot of other farmers that I have observed losing their ass on Mangalitsa's because they don't have a buttoned up program like he has. because he's been doing it and he's built the market and he has done everything with that focus. So, all right. Where are we at here? See, we got 6 of y'all here. This is cool. All right. I'm going to try to wind down here in the next 15 minutes. I got 2 more topics to cover. And this one is from Mike Stevens, and he wanted to talk a little bit more about why, talk about some of the roadblocks for small farmers who want to get their animals processed but are unable to do that in a profitable manner thanks to the United States Department of Agriculture. I made a video about this a while ago. It was by far my highest performing video on this channel. I didn't expect it to take off. It was just kind of me ranting a little bit because I got an email from a potential customer who said, hey, listen, how do you slaughter your animals? Is it any different from the way like the big evil, industrial ag, the way they slaughter their animals, or like, how do you do that? And then also, hey, can I just buy a package of bacon off of you because I want to just taste what the meat is like? And I got to explain to him that actually, as it turns out, because I prioritize a humane, ethical, on-farm slaughter of my animals, because I don't want to truck them off to a USDA place where they have to be crammed in with a bunch of strange animals, penned, and be like upset, stressed out, and in a strange place where then they get herded into a chamber and just get whacked. It's like I put a lot of time and money and effort into giving these animals a really good life, only to have all of that wiped off the board in their last 36 hours of life. That like they have a great life, only to like that last bit, the final home stretch is just complete trash. That seems, I don't like that. I don't like that. And so here's the deal. In order to sell retail cuts of meat, like if I want to sell you a pound of bacon instead of an entire pig with bacon processed into 1 pound packages, etc., I have to send it to a USDA inspected processor. And the long and short of it is that there are a limited amount of USDA processors in the country, and a lot of the big ag companies, there's actually a video about this on, and let me see, I'm going to try to do a little, I got 5 of you guys with me. Let me see if I can do this real quick. Let's go over here, and this, all right, this is a video by More Perfect Union.
They only care about how much they can line their pockets with.
You're seeing panic already from families of, I don't know what I'm going to be doing if I don't have a job. How am I going to pay my house? How am I going to feed my children?
Tyson Foods is valued at $20 billion. When they shut this plant down, 3,200 people in this town of 11,000 will lose their jobs.
I have friends whose parents worked there for over 30 years. Their employees deserve a lot more than what they're getting right now.
So right now we're at a job fair that's just down the street from the Tyson plant. This woman and her little girl have been talking to different employers about what opportunities there might be for her after Tyson closes its doors.
Yo tengo casa aquí, yo la compré y pues no sé qué hacer con los...
This is a rhetorical question, obviously, but why is it that none of these 1,100 people are getting together and saying, hey, you know what, we could pool a few $1,000 and pour a concrete slab and get some stainless steel cutting benches and a set of knives in here and get some bleach. And we're going to start processing animals ourselves, because if these guys want to, cut us out, we're going to work directly with farmers and start processing animals. Well, great question. I'm glad you asked, because this is the central control mechanism that enables big ag to be big and gatekeeps against anyone who is trying to challenge that system. Because if you want to start a butcher shop, good luck, because it's going to take millions of dollars for you to do that. And this means that unless you can put millions of dollars worth of animals through that at a time, well, I guess you can't do it. So let's say you're in New Hampshire. You want to get a small USDA shop open, because, okay, well, we got to check in with the federal government because they need to make sure that our animals are healthy or something. So, okay. So we try to do that. And we put, let's say, $500,000 into a reasonably sized building. Now, we have to pay that cost off because we just bit off a big chunk of debt. So now we got to make money. How many pigs do you think are going to USDA processor in New Hampshire? Not enough to pay off that banknote. So then what happens? Well, I got to keep my doors open. I got to be cutting meat, because guess what? I've hired staff to make sure that we can process animals here and to keep things going. And I got to pay for, everything, to the toilet for the inspector to have so that he can use that. The USDA guy, the guy with the clipboard who's overseeing everything, they got to be there. So, well, I don't have the volume coming in from local farmers. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to start advertising to farms that are, let's say, in Ohio, Pennsylvania, maybe Iowa, and see if they're, need to, willing to ship their animals out here. And that way we can maintain the volume that we need to keep our doors open. And then the problem is that when you have, okay, sweetie. In just a second. So the problem is that when you now have to bring in animals from out of state, then what happens when local farmer, I show up and I say, hey, I got 3 hogs that I want to get done. And they say, we can fit you in on Tuesday the 3rd. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And they say of 2027, January 2027. Have a nice day. And now I have a butcher date that I have to schedule or lose because their volume is insane, because the amount of overhead that goes into running a USDA butcher shop and maintaining all of those regulations. Now, in the state of New Hampshire, we have something called custom exempt. It is exempt from USDA butchering, and this would basically be what is done with venison. Like Chris mentioned earlier, custom exempt is basically you say, this is my deer, I shot it, I don't care if you find parasites or what you think is wrong with it, this is my deer, I just want you to cut it up for me, I'm not selling it, I'm not doing anything else, there's no money changing hands, I'm going to just pay you money, you're going to butcher it, seal it, do this for me, give it to me, and I'm going to take it, and that's it. Now, the USDA doesn't have to be involved in that. They're not worried about anybody getting killed or getting sick. The only time when the USDA magically is concerned, it's like that meme where with Shaq where he's sleeping and then all of a sudden his eyes are open and he's got like laser eyes. The USDA all of a sudden gets really concerned about everybody's health and safety as soon as money starts changing hands. And, okay, a little technical difficulty here. All right. As I repair my setup. Okay. Sweetheart, are you okay? Are you okay? Wait, are you okay? What hurts?
My knee.
Okay, listen. You didn't fall hard. Just walk it off, okay?
Good night.
Good night, sweetheart. I'm going to come up and kiss you goodnight. I'm almost done. Technical difficulties. So the point is that you have, um, you know, this inability to have money changing hands without the USDA getting involved. And so the biggest thing that you're losing by having to sell whole and half animals is you're losing convenience. And that makes it really hard to market your product to the general public because, like, for example, I live in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has a substantial percentage of the population that are retirees. There's a lot of retirees that remember the good old days when, like, everybody was raising pigs and farming and community and all that stuff. But the problem is, most of those retirees, it's like, one or two people, they're not going to eat a whole pig in a year. And maybe, they have limited income. They're not going to be putting $500 down for a deposit. And then when they got to pay for everything, and it's like you're spending all this money, and then you got to store all this meat, and then you got to eat it all by a certain time. And it becomes a pain in the butt. They just want a pound of bacon and a package of pork chops and see you later. And a lot of those people, they don't mind paying more for a higher quality product, but it limits the audience. It limits the market of who you can actually sell to because the USDA gets involved. And there really is no good reason for it. I mean, if you look at all the outbreaks that happen, there's been E. coli and all kinds of, weird foodborne illnesses that have occurred over the last several years, and I don't have them all on hand, but you always hear stuff popping up on the news that there's been some foodborne illness and it's a problem and it's going to limit the supply, and so the price goes up. Ironically, that's always seems to be the net result. And it's because you have these big plans, and it's like, oh, well, thank God for the USDA. At least we know where all that hamburger went to and where it all came from, so we can make sure to recall 50,000 pounds of hamburger. And okay, so I'll play along with that. Like, if you have animal carcasses that are coming in from other countries, which, despite what President Trump says, I don't think is really a policy that we should be pursuing. We should be trying to minimize the amount of animals that we have coming in from other countries, and then let the processing happen locally so that you get the same amount, if not more, scrutiny and traceability based on the fact that it's like, oh yeah, I bought this pig from Steve over at Rowan Ridge Farm, and I can go over there anytime I want. And if I ate a bad pork chop, I know exactly where that pork chop came from. I know the farm that it came from, and I can talk to him, and he knows the grandparents of the pig that I ate. So, there's accountability and traceability that are there with local, smaller production models without ever having to involve the USDA, and which would allow people to undercut the big corporations like this, because it's kind of disgraceful and sad that you have, and that video that I showed you, that short just a little bit ago by A More Perfect Union, a lot of these channel, I mean, they have 2.5 million subs, and I'm not trying to dunk on them, but a lot of these channels are kind of activist type stuff where it's like, oh, that's why we need the government to stick it to these big corporations. And that's literally the opposite of what we need. We don't need the government to limit Tyson Foods. We need the government to stop gatekeeping the competition, because if you told people and said, hey, you know what, you set up a butcher shop, you can actually work with farmers directly and bypass these big companies. You can own your own business. You can make your own money, cut the USDA out of it, set your own prices, work with people that you like, doing a job that you know how to do well, and you can do it better with more accountability, more connection to your community. So you're not just feeling like you're on an assembly line, just, swinging a knife. And you can actually make a difference doing this. How many people, I mean, literally, and it is a rhetorical question, how many people wouldn't quit their jobs and go open a butcher shop? How many people wouldn't start farming and raising some pigs to take to that butcher shop? And the answer is, well, I'm here. How do you think I got here? How do you think you guys got here? I know at least 4 people in my town, which is Charlestown, New Hampshire, is small. It's not rural Idaho where we're in the middle of pig country. It's a relatively small town where there are I've had 4 people here talk to me about starting their own butcher shop because they like butchering and they want to do this and they're trying to make it work and trying to figure out how to get around, make it profitable despite the USDA thing, being in the way. And so what has happened is that in New Hampshire, we have a bill in the state Senate right now. It went through the House of Representatives, the Congress, and now it's going to the state Senate. House Bill 396 that basically is going to say intrastate sale of meat in retail cuts is okay without USDA inspection. Basically alluding to kind of what I was saying earlier, where it's like, look, if you can go to the farm and it's being sold within the state, everything is small enough, close enough, where you don't have to worry about, pigs coming in from China and that going all out to Mobile, Alabama, and then somebody getting sick and like, oh, I don't know, it's just where did it come from, right? So that's something that is going on. But New Hampshire is a very libertarian heavy, very freedom oriented. We got some pretty prickly folks out here. And you wouldn't believe some of the whining and the crying about like, oh, what's going to happen? How are we going to make people? Oh, well, maybe you're ethical and so you're not going to sell bad meat. But what happens when some bad, evil farmer decides that he wants to sell bad meat? And it's like, you go and you take the responsibility to see how your food is being produced. Like, find somebody in your town and take a minute and say, oh, like, show me what you're doing. Like, is this somebody that I could talk to and I think is reliable? Is this somebody who's like kind of shifty and always like acting weird? Or is this somebody that like I more or less trust? Because I promise you, if you go into like a big USDA factory owned, like a Tyson meat plant, a lot of the people who are on the line swinging a knife, and I don't mean any disrespect by saying this, but these are not people that you would probably sign up to babysit your kids. These are people that have a relatively questionable, that have some history, have some miles on them. Because, like, what job are you going to get? Oh, well, I can get a job swinging a knife at a Tyson processing plant because they don't really care what, if I just got out of prison or like what happened, what my background looks like. It's like, hey, and again, not saying that's everybody, but we are setting up this process through the USDA where we funnel everything to a company like that, where they now have the power to make or break a town, when in reality, the whole thing is ass backwards. Those people getting laid off should be able to get together and say, hey, you know what? We're going to open our own shop and we're going to take a chunk of your business and we're going to actually work with some of the farmers. And we're going to do that in areas, and we're going to move out and start a butcher shop that's close to this rancher where we know we get, a couple hundred head of cattle from a year. We're going to move into their town. We're going to start a butcher shop there. And then that way, they don't have to truck their animals halfway across the country to you. And people are actually going to be able to get good quality meat that they can sell and buy locally. And why would, what's the point of having all of this foreign stuff and everything traveling all of these different places when, if we got the government regulations out of the way so that there was an incentive, a financial incentive. And here's the thing, come back to this point again, only you can defeat communism, right? And this is the thing, you have to have financial incentive. It's not a bad thing to have a profitable business. And if you made it so that farms and butchers and food producers could make a profit easily, like, there's a lot of people who like the pork that I produce. There's a lot of people who like to eat that. The problem is most people don't have the attention span and the time and the freezer space and the money to buy a whole pig all at once. And so it's kind of like, well, maybe every now and then, but like end of the day, they're gonna go and they're gonna get their pig from their pork, their bacon. They're gonna get that from the grocery store, from Dollar General or whatever, because look, it's Smithfield, but it's convenient and it's easy. And why is it convenient and easy for these big companies to do it? It's not because there aren't people who are, like the whole thing with Elon Musk and the H-1B thing, when he was, talking about how like, and him and Vivek Ramaswamy, there's another real bunch of clowns, there, and talking about how like, oh yeah, we don't have workers, and Trump was saying something about this in an interview too, how like, oh yeah, we don't have workers who can do this stuff and get it done. We don't have the innovation. We have to bring in people from other countries, and it's like, no, what we have is we have too much regulation that stymies creativity and keeps people from actually producing in a way that would be profitable because there's no financial incentive. Get rid of taxes on farms, give them a 10-year tax moratorium, and say, hey, you know what? You can sell whatever you want within your state. Obviously, there's malpractice or whatever type of, lawsuits. You're not selling stuff across state lines, and there has to be a little bit of like very minimal oversight from the government, and let it go. And you'd be surprised how many people wouldn't make it happen. And especially if you found that you could actually make a living doing that, like, yeah, that's a good way to go. That's a good thing to do. So I guess the other thing too that I would just touch on here to bring your attention to is the Prime Act. And I made a video a little bit ago, kind of dragging President Trump. My views on most things are fairly nuanced. I didn't think that Trump was as bad as the people who have Trump derangement syndrome think. He's not the great Satan. He's also, Trump cultists that are like kissing his keister. I can't really do that either because, especially in this administration and this second term, he has been a colossal and raging disappointment, which is even more insulting because on some level with Biden or a Harris or a Tim Walz, people like that, you kind of expect it from, but when you campaigned and ran on all this anti-corruption and we're going to, chicken in every pot and we're going to get everybody up to speed again, we're going to make America great. And it's like, hey, dude, the last time America was great, we didn't have to ask permission from the federal government to sell a pound of bacon to our neighbor because Karen at the USDA is worried that like, well, what if you're bad and you sell bad meat to your neighbor? It's like, yeah, okay, well, what if my neighbor and I get into a fight and I flatten his tires? Or, my dog takes a crap on his lawn and like he yells at me on the phone. Like, okay, there's all these different things. We don't need to have federal oversight in all of that. And it's being undercut by government regulation. So instead of dealing with the problem, we have foreign aid going to Argentina to bring in more imports, strengthening this globalist idea instead of, hey, let's feed our communities, let's feed ourselves, our neighbors, let's like build community and feed ourselves and each other. No, it's let's keep the whole international nonsense thing going strong. The government regulations are the heart of the problem. And the other big thing that I really took issue with Trump about was his treatment of Thomas Massey, who is literally the only person in government that I trust, maybe to a lesser extent Rand Paul, and Ron Paul. Like Ron Paul's seemed like he was on the level, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Not that I was a huge fan of her, or that I trusted her as much as the idea that like she really went hard in the paint for Trump. She went hard in the paint for that guy, and she got mocked and just dragged on social media and like everywhere, and like her reputation really, she put everything on the line for what that's worth, and then he just kind of told her to piss off, and that was that. But like Thomas Massey, like he's a farmer, he's an engineer, and the Prime Act is basically like what they're doing here or attempting to do here in New Hampshire, which basically says that any meat that is being sold within state lines does not need USDA inspection. And so people who want USDA meat or who want to sell meat across state lines, hey, knock yourself out, go to a USDA butcher. But the people who just want to sell a package of pork chops to my neighbor on this side and a package of bacon to my neighbor on the other side of the street, we don't have to go to the USDA. We can just use a custom butcher. What's going on here? Yeah, we can just use a custom butcher, and they can get our stuff. They can get our stuff done, and it'll be just as easy because there's there's a lot of non-USDA butchers here in New Hampshire that I work with that are fantastic. And I love working with them. They do great work, clean, fast, affordable. And the nice thing is I can see my animal get slaughtered. I know, and my customer, if they want to come and they want to participate or they want to watch, they can be involved in that too. I don't have to wait for, them to go and kind of be involved in a situation where I can't even supervise. I can't see what's going on, but I can make sure the whole thing is done up to the way I want it done, respectfully, on my property. My customer can even be there. They can see everything happening. And, what's not to like about that? It's a good setup. And the nice thing is, if I have a pig that I'm like, I got to get rid of this pig, I can call up my butcher, Doug. Hey, Doug, can you come over like next week, couple weeks? When's the next opening you got? Oh, 3 weeks? Great. Mark it on the calendar. Done deal. I don't have to make butcher dates and call in advance to get butcher dates for animals that have not even been conceived yet, let alone farrowed. It's like that far ahead. You're like biting off so much more than you can chew, because now you have to make sure that you get the animals to fulfill those orders. What if demand changes in the meantime? Well, you got those butcher spots. You better figure out how to fill them. And again, it's not that the USDA people are, evil and have hearts are full of greed and they have doo-doo in their souls. Michael Jackson, South Park. Anybody remembers that episode? A little reference there. Shout out. But it's because, these people running these USDA shops, they got to keep throughput going. And if they're cutting down on the throughput, then they're not able to pay their banknote. And then their big expensive butcher shop with all the regulatory stuff in place goes out the window, and then it closes down. And now we have another, butcher shop that goes under. And now if you want to actually sell stuff USDA inspected, good luck. You have to just take it further away. And it just gets the problem. You can see the problem compounding. Government regulations are the problem. USDA gatekeeps in order to make that stuff happen. It's disgraceful. It is shameful that in the land of the free, where our forefathers died to prevent taxes, that our money is being siphoned off by people who hate our country and are using tax fraud to enrich themselves by the enrichment of agents who work for foreign governments and shamelessly sing the praises of foreign countries above those that they were elected to represent. And looking at you, Ted Cruz. Can't wait to vote against you in the primary. Anywho. Hey, Chris, take care. Look forward to seeing you. I know I'm getting ready to wind this down here as well, because I got some littles to put to bed myself, but I appreciate you being here. I got one more little rant, and that is that, more people farming and more people explaining to people, because the thing is, there's a lot of people that'll watch like the More Perfect Union stuff, and they'll be like, oh man, this is terrible. Oh, I'm so pissed about this. And then you ask them, hey, what do you think about maybe getting rid of the USDA? Oh no, we can't do that. They keep us safe. We need the USDA. We can't. And it's like, no, you got to understand that more people pushing to remove regulations to that gatekeep for these big companies. Because at the end of the day, I don't have a problem with big business. I don't have a problem with billionaires. What I have a problem with is the government that is elected by and paid for by me and you, presumably. I have a problem with that government setting up parameters and hurdles that I can't get over, but that all of these big banker-backed conglomerates are able to just step over like it's no big deal, and then it's a fixed game. And that's not okay. There needs to be competition from sectors in the market where there are people who want to compete and who can build a better mousetrap. And I bet you, if you talk to those 1,100 people in that video there, that short that I just played, that town in Nebraska, you talk to some of those people, I bet you could find a couple of pissed off people that would say, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's put our money together and let's start a butcher shop here. let's show these guys a thing or two how we can cut meat, and we'll build a better mousetrap. We'll do it cleaner, faster, better, and we'll make it closer to the farms, and we'll make it work. But they can't, because the government regulations are just, they don't have the backing of the, you know, industrial behemoths. And that's the thing that's stopping things, because people can't compete. It's a fixed game. All right. Lastly, and I'm going to wrap this up, I'm going to do a quick run of, and I got to thank, excuse me, I got to thank Sean again for this question. Sean asked farming YouTube channels who I watched when I got started in farming and who I watch now. And the short answer to that, who I watch now, is pretty much nobody. I barely have time to make my own videos, and I don't really find most of the homesteading content very interesting or useful. There are some homesteaders that, the thing that I actually find interesting is hearing farmers and homesteaders talk about politics, because these are people who generally, I feel like, I would expect to have a little more rational, balanced perspective on things. There's definitely a couple that are in the $7,000 club, and that they are getting, I think, they're very slanted on some foreign policy issues, let's put it that way. But that notwithstanding, I like to hear people that I can relate to, people who are, you know, involved in life and death stuff, and that are practically know how to get their hands dirty a little bit. I like hearing those people talk about their experience and where they kind of connect to the larger social and political issues, rather than the pointy-headed Tim Pool types that, you know, they're YouTubers. They're not, they don't. And watch currently, watching, like I mentioned, I've been kind of following a lot of the Charlie Kirk saga. I do watch some of Candace Owens' stuff. I find her really arrogant, personally. I think some of her questions are interesting, and I think it's good that we have somebody who's just kind of willing to throw stuff against the wall to see what sticks. I'm all for that. But I think that she kind of comes out real hot and heavy with stuff that's kind of out of left field, without having the humility to listen to other people. And when somebody says, hey, I actually, you know, I like what you're doing, I like your work, but I kind of feel like, you know, this might not be the best path to go down with this particular thing that you're exploring, and I don't think you're right, then everybody she's got like an army of simps who make videos about every video that she makes. And those people just get up in arms and are like, oh, you just hate Candace. You just hate Candace. You're a government plant. You're a CIA. You're a deep state, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, come on. Not everybody, you know, we should be able to have disagreements about things and say, you know, there's some people that are a little more like modern artists. They color outside the lines more. Yeah, that's what Candace Owens does. I don't expect her to bat 1,000. She throws a bunch of shit against the wall. We see what sticks. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. It's important to keep that pressure on by keeping questions coming, because I think what everybody with an IQ above room temperature can accept is the fact that the official narrative absolutely is nonsense, and that, you know, the guy was not eliminated with a 30-06. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. Kash Patel is a weasel. He is an absolute disgrace. Bongino, I'm not sure what to think of him, and that's not even the point. But basically, so I do watch some Candace Owens stuff, and then I watch a handful of other channels that comment on this stuff. So like Valhalla VFT, I think he's got a lot of interesting stuff. And there's a couple other, like Jesse on Fire is pretty good. Sometimes I watch like Piers Morgan. I like to hear that people just yell at each other. It's kind of funny. Anytime you get like the pro-Israel, anti-Israel people, and like you just see them like start popping blood vessels, that's a pretty good time. I enjoy seeing that, because I mean, my thing is, I just, you know, I shouldn't have any investment in like pro or con what Israel is doing in their foreign policy. It shouldn't matter what I think. And if I wasn't sending my tax dollars over there to fund it, it wouldn't matter what I think. And so that's kind of the point that I want to get to. But anyways, you didn't ask about my foreign policy perspectives. on things. But that's kind of what I watch, a lot of like current events stuff. Used to watch Tim Fool. Don't watch him any longer. And then the other thing that I watched, there's the guy I just started, like, I like watching things about not ancient aliens. That's the wrong, like hidden history, ancient alternative archaeology. Not even Atlantis, because Atlantis is like old hat, but stuff like Nephilim, giants, like what's actually in the mounds in the central part of the U.S. and like the, I don't know, like Timothy Alberino, Blurry Creatures podcast. Those are kind of some bigger channels. I like to listen to those, and Heavy Duty Country is another guy that I like listening to as well. Only his episodes are way too short, and that irritates me because I know people used to get on me for making long episodes, and they would say, "Oh, I only have time for like a 6-7 minute episode. So you can't make long episodes." And I'm like, I think about the way I listen to stuff on YouTube, and I put something on, and I go out in the barn, and I sit there and I, clean the barn and do my work, and like Dan from Heavy Duty Country, he puts on a great commentary for like 6-7 minutes, and then it's like outro music, and I'm like, damn it, I got to take my gloves off and dig my phone out of my pocket, and I got to scroll through, and the cell phone service is terrible, so I have a hard time finding the next video I want to watch. And it's like, dude, why can't you just like sit down for 20 minutes and really unpack stuff? Just kind of take your time a little bit. But yeah, some of the hidden history stuff, there's what's it? Hammerson, hell, I don't remember the last name of the guy, Hammerson something. It's a channel where he basically explores cryptid sightings. So basically, like the video I was watching today, and I find this stuff very interesting because I used to live in Alaska, and Chris, I know Chris went to bed, said he's going to come back tomorrow. So Chris, if you see this tomorrow, you can drop a comment and let me know what perspective you may have about any of this stuff. But like, basically, like in the Yukon Territory and the Great White North, basically Native American legends and stories about all the ivory that they would find, because there was all these woolly mammoths and what's the other word? The woolly mammoth and the other one that's like a woolly mammoth, but it's a different name. And it's going to bother me because it's right on the tip of my tongue, and I had a brain fart and it's gone. But mammoth, woolly mammoth. Oh hell, that's gonna bug me. Anyways, Mastodon. There it is, Mastodon, like the band Mastodon. Excellent band as well if you like progressive metal. Mastodon makes some pretty rockin' hits. So they would like talk about finding. And even in some cases, and this is like early 1900s, late 1800s, talking about like killing mastodons and taking their meat and harvesting their tusks. And these are in parts of the country where like, the Native Americans were like not excited about going to these places. They were kind of, they were pretty, like, hey, nobody goes out here because this stuff is whack. And so there's stuff out there that they're like, yeah, it's pretty burly out there in some of those parts of the country. So I like listening to some of those accounts and some of the things that are a little bit more fanciful because, I'm not betting anything on whether or not it's currently accurate or if it's 100% accurate. It's like, hey, this is some interesting stuff, and there's a lot of areas of the country that are very poorly understood and very underexplored. And so I like to be up on different things that people have found or are finding there and kind of get an idea that way of like kind of, what could be out there. I think that would be super exciting. Like I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, the Mokele Mbembe. It was a dinosaur that was identified by all of these indigenous tribes in the Congo that had no previous outside contact with like white people, and so they said, they showed them pictures and they picked out like this one dinosaur type looking thing, and they said, no, it's not this, 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 or this. It's definitely this one. They all, like in all these different areas along the Congo River, they kept saying, this is the one, and it's here. Hey, there's the world is a very interesting and mysterious place, and so that's some of the stuff that I like to listen to when I'm out in the barn. From the sublime to the ridiculous. And then in terms of, the relevant question here, in terms of like farming YouTube channels, when I got started, Joel Salatin, I read a lot of his books. The Majestic Pigness of Pigs, I think is the name of the book. That book really turned me on to pigs. I watched some of his stuff. I mean, I've been aware of Joel Salatin since he was in that Netflix documentary around like 2010 or so, and this was long before I had any interest in farming, but I recognized him when I looked at his book, and I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting guy. I like the cut of his jib and his view on things, that there should be, generally speaking, some level of harmony existing between nature and what we're doing as farmers. And it kind of aligns with his not super preachy, but biblical Christian understanding of, worldview and acting responsibly within the creation that we've been charged to take care of and to oversee. And I like that. I've been a big fan of that. So I like Salatin for that reason. I watched a little bit of some Sheridan Park farms. They have some good stuff. Also, Just a Few Acres farm, I believe Pete from Just a Few Acres. He actually is in upstate New York, has a book. Not a great book, not a great read. It's kind of more of like a personal memoir. And it was nice to read it and to support him, but not something that I would say is like, oh yeah, definitely read this before you get into farming. It's kind of neither here nor there. But those guys are kind of like YouTubers, and I'm going to do a video about this, and I'm going to actually have like a full list, and I'm going to go into a little more detail and just focus on this topic. But these guys, these bigger YouTube channels, the Justin Rhodes, the Homesteadies, these are guys that are like more of a 30,000 foot view, because they're deep in the weeds. They've been doing this for a long time. They've got some miles under their belt, and it's like, okay, this kind of helps me get an idea of what I want to do and how and where. But when it came down to actually doing, then my interest in these videos dropped off pretty quickly in those creators. Like I said earlier, some of those guys are much better YouTubers than they are farmers, and that's, no disrespect. There's some great farmers that are lousy or not at all YouTubers, and that's totally cool. I'm not saying that to disrespect them. It's just you got to know what you're getting when you're watching somebody, because there's some people that I watch for entertainment, there's some people that I watch for information, there's some people that I watch for inspiration. And so you have to be aware and not just go in with a blank slate and say, oh, let's just see what happens, I'm just going to give this person a whole bunch of my time. You have to kind of say, all right, like I have a plan, I want to get something out of this, and make sure that you get what you're paying for. In terms of currently who I tend to watch in the homestead space, there are some times when I will watch, there's a channel called Heifer USA that has a playlist about pastured pigs, and pastured pigs specifically. Like there's some fluffy videos, vlogs about pastured pigs, but Heifer USA, they have a playlist about like kind of start to finish how they do everything. Now, granted, I don't agree with every one of their methods. Like they talk about, the efforts that they go to keep their pigs' waters from freezing, and they're in Arkansas, so they have some weather. There's some freezing, and I'm like, dude, you guys could do like way less effort on the water, and you would be totally fine. But that notwithstanding, I mean, they have a really in-depth, thorough playlist that talks about how they do what they do, and it's very cleanly done. It's very good information, very well laid out, very topic driven. It's not vloggy, and that's one of the things like with Sheraton Park Farms. Chuck seems like a really cool dude. I started off watching his channel. The problem is, like, I want to know about, like, how are you castrating your piglets. I don't want to hear the musical interlude and watch you ride around in your whatever that little cart thing is. It's like, I know you have a farm and you have pigs and it's cool and it's bigger and better than mine. That's like, that's nice, but that's not what I'm here for when I'm watching that. Because the commentary is kind of limited too. And there's some that, I mean, to be fair, I put a little bit of commentary into some of these like live streams, especially where I go a little bit off into some rabbit trails, because I have that luxury of doing that. It's a little more conversational. It's kind of like what we might talk about if you were hanging out with me and you came over to visit, like Mike, if you're still there in the chat. Like, this is kind of more like what it's like hanging out. But like if I'm doing something topical, I want to try to balance that a little bit better and not I want to try to go real easy on fluff. I'll talk about stuff if I think it's relevant, and I will go into as much detail as I feel like it requires to complete the thought and to complete the information on the topic. I have no problem with doing that, but I try not to do that with fluff. I try to do that with actual commentary and discussion and information. And some of it may be a little redundant, and I don't care about that. I mean, I'd rather have too much than too little, and I want to make sure that I really distill the idea in clearly. I want to make sure that it lands and that it's good. But yeah, Heifer USA is a big one that I have been watching a lot, and then the other one is Dowdle Family Farms, and I believe Rob is the gentleman's name from Dowdle Family Farms. He is a erstwhile pastor, from what I can gather, and also they're raising Berks on pasture down in Mississippi. Now the weather obviously is very different, and like the topography, so like looking at how they move their pigs and like break up paddocks, and it's like everything is flat as a pancake. I'm like, man, that must be nice. Like everything is just like up and down and all around here and super rocky. So it's a very different environment, but I have gained a lot by listening to him explain how he manages cover crops and how, really digging into like which cover crops are best for you to focus on. And of course, I have to recalibrate a lot of that information for my part of the country and the seasonality, because it doesn't line up with what he's doing down in Mississippi. But he's put a lot of work into like researching the nutritional benefits and discussing that stuff in a very, straightforward academic way. And he's got a great operation and raising the pigs on pasture. It's bitching. Like, it's really cool. I like watching his channel to see stuff like that. And there's another one, because I don't want to forget this one. I got to go back a couple of pages here in my notebook. Gibson Branch. I don't know what the guy's name is, but kind of a homestead channel. And I really like his channel because I think he gives a very no frills, no fluff, no nonsense look at homesteading and farming. His video that really triggered me to subscribe was the one where he was basically admonishing homesteaders, like, not to try to do everything. Pick one thing and do that thing really well and get rid of everything else. And I reached a similar conclusion, because when I started off with chickens, and I got pigs, and then I got like goats, and then I got a cow, and then there were some sheep. And I realized that, you know what, like, I can't do everything, and the time that it costs is just prohibitive. So what I'm going to do is, like, I'd rather buy a dozen eggs from a farmer down the road who's just doing eggs, excuse me, and let that be that. I'm going to put the focus on one thing at a time, and I'm going to do it until I can do it smoothly, cleanly, and not have much or any inertia in that process and remove all that friction out of that system. And then once I've done that, then I can go back and say, okay, like I'm going to, take up fly tying and fishing again. Or I'm going to, add another type of animal, species of animal onto my farm and try to do something with that. Right. So there's some different options there, how we approach that. But Gibson Branch is a real good guy. I recommend people follow him and watch some of his content because I think he's very blunt, and I enjoy that. And then lastly is Red Tool House Farms. That's Troy McClung. He has the Pastured Pig podcast, and I included his YouTube channel not because I actually watch his YouTube channel. I included his YouTube channel because I really found him through podcasts, because when I really started doing, getting into farming, I wasn't hardly on YouTube at all, consuming stuff on YouTube. It was only when I needed to see how to do something and I needed it to be visual. But I would spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, and then I'd be driving, walking, whatever I was doing. I would, working out. It would always be kind of having this playing in the background. I found the Pastured Pig podcast on the Apple podcast app, and he would always mention his YouTube channel. And I think that episode of, or I think that podcast, there's a playlist on his channel that is just the podcast, but there's an episode actually of the Pastured Pig podcast where I met one of his guests. I sent her an email, gal from Virginia, Molly, and like she wound up becoming a really big influence in what I do with pigs, and kind of really was, there's some people when you start talking to them and you have a question and like they actually care if you got the right idea and if they help solve your problem and they actually want you to do better. That's kind of like how it went for me when I emailed this gal who was a guest on his podcast. And so I don't watch his podcast anymore, but every now and then, if I have a question about something that's going on medically with one of my pigs, I'll send a text message to Molly, and she's been very, very generous with medication and help and all this stuff over the years. And so I appreciate that connection that came out of that podcast. So here we are. And it is January 1st, and already my time management is off to a really glowing start, as we're well into the wee hours of the morning. I want to just say once again, thank you guys for taking the time to be here. I don't know who is still here, although I have my suspicions. I'm assuming that Mike is still here and Sean. I don't know who number 3 is, because Chris said that he was going to bed. But if you have made it this far in the live stream, my hat is figuratively and literally off to you. I don't want to expose you to the disaster that is my hair, so I'll keep that brief. But thank you for taking the time to join us for this live stream. I'm going to be doing more live streams. Make sure you're subscribed. Share this. Share the channel. Anything that you can do to help us grow our reach. We want to help more people. We want to make America farmers again. And we're putting in the work here, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. I'll do posts and put stuff up until I have a chance to do another live stream. I'll probably do a couple more live streams, because live streams are easier to do, not necessarily 3.5 hour live streams, but I can pull off a live stream pretty quickly, and we can get down to business without a lot of editing and goofing around, where some of the videos that I got to do, those are going to still take some. I kind of touched on a lot of videos that I'm going to do here, but we'll clean them up a little bit and make something that works. So on that note, folks, good evening. Thank you for being here with us. We will see you guys on the next video. let's make America farmers again. Happy New Year. Get you guys some sleep. I know that's where I'm headed right now.